How's it going, everybody? This is Aaron the Pedantic, and today we are, let me introduce everybody else. So we have Prince of Nothing from the Prince of, what's the blog called?
It's my blog is called Age of Dusk.
Age of Dusk.
The URL is Prince of Nothing Blogs .wordpress.com. Infamous OSR reviewer, purveyor of the No Art Punk contest, and occasional module cobbler. Glad to be here, Aaron.
Pleasure to have you. We got YeOldeGeek, and I guess everybody can just introduce themselves because you'll do it better than I will.
Well, I'm John. It's the old geek, by the way. I've got to be pedantic about it because that YE is an old way of writing the. So,
fair point. I don't know why I overlooked that. So then we have No Fun Allowed.
How's it going? No fun allowed. Contrary to my name, I sometimes allow fun, and I've got a channel, a YouTube channel, where I cover a whole bunch of adventures and game systems and all that fun jazz.
All right, and then we have Appendix and Terrorist, otherwise known as Ash of Creativity, otherwise known as James Streisand, and he's muted, just as a reminder.
Hi, I'm muted for the moment on account of the lawnmower outside my window.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So we are here today to discuss modules. This is Prince of Nothing's fantastic idea that we just get together and discuss what are our favorite modules and why, and we're just gonna rip with all of you in the comments about all this stuff. It looks like we have one last invader. One last invader. Apt considering the rage that is known as Elden Ring, which has taken over the world. And I don't even know if it has invaders. I just know this is Souls game.
Oh, it has all that good stuff, yeah.
Okay. All right. So Particularist, introduce yourself.
Well, I was on the stream once before. I don't know. I have run a decent amount of modules from like published modules, which I believe is the topic here today.
Yes.
So I think that should be. I should have something to contribute, hopefully.
I believe you will. Okay. Well, we're gonna start with Prince of Nothing. First, as it is favorite modules, it is going to be incredibly subjective. We are not going to be saying the best modules for people to run. Although if that's what your idea
very clearly is, these are one and the same for all of us. What are you talking about?
So they can be for whatever reason whatsoever. It could be just because there's a sexy lady on the cover. Who knows? I'm just kidding. That's not appropriate. Prince of Nothing, go ahead.
So my first suggestion, and I think it probably works if we just bring up one each and I kind of like rotate and then just get two each total or whatever. That would be my suggestion. But my first one actually does have a sexy lady on the cover. This is called it's called B12 Queen's Harvest. A little known module in the B series that I am particularly fond of. It's a little shitty. Not the best pitch. No, the beginning of the module is not that strong. You're basically tasked with retrieving some sort of artifact from a wizard's basement, and the basement is a dungeon which includes, this is for low level characters, right? It includes, among other things, a gargoyle and a sort of whatever 80s variant of like the snitches from Harry Potter, only equipped with needles with sleeping poison. But that part is actually not very good. The actual good part of the adventure comes later, when you have to stage an attack on the fiendish Queen Ishana of Chaos, who has gathered her the stereotypical horde of humanoids. But the point is, she has a little castle somewhere in the mountains, and you actually have to attack it. It's a fairly simple map, but there's a guard schedule. There's an order of battle. There's plans for what the various humanoid factions will do if they're attacked. There's even like procedures that they'll take to say, if you attack them and you build your camp fairly close to the castle, they have a chance of like tracking you back and attacking you in the middle of the night. Running this adventure for my own players was a huge blast, and I felt like it really sort of like honed their tactical abilities as well, because they had to come up with like ways of attacking it. So they started, I think they started throwing like approaching the fortress, then throwing sleeping spells at like one of the towers. Then they would like stealthily rush up there and cut everyone's throats, and then like move in deeper into the fortress. It was like a huge deal. And later on, they started ambushing the various humanoids. So it's a really good adventure, or at least that component is really great. And I don't think it's talked about all that well. And I haven't really seen any OSR attempts at like redoing it but better, which I would like to see, because it's I think it's full of potential, but it also has some flaws. So yeah, definitely worthwhile. So that would be one of my picks.
Nice. Yeah, I've that is one of the few TSR vitamins, B12, that I have not really heard much about. So it's cool to hear about that. But you said it was kind of terrible though, didn't you? So like, what's the terrible?
Well, I thought that the dungeon in the beginning isn't that strong. It's also not bad. I like the way they used a rust monster or whatever, but the final attack on that queen, once you get through the actual fortress part, the dungeon that follows is kind of linear. It has some nice like screw bag traps, but it's a little weak. In the same way that the section with the wizard's dungeon also, there are definitely some fun elements in there, but if you compare it to something stronger, say the B5 or what's another good dungeon, even the dungeon in T1 would be a little bit better. So that's those segments they're good enough, but they're not masterpieces by any means. But the actual fortress attack part is great. Heartily recommended.
This is an interesting question. Total party skills. I just addressed this. We're not talking about the best. He says, "What are the parameters to determine best? What are like 3 or 4 universal qualities must be fulfilled?" I think that's going to have to be a topic for another day. Damn, yeah, I feel like that's kind of, because I feel like we'd all have something to say on that, and that would just be a whole nother ball of wax. But favorite,
I don't think we'd agree either.
So YeOldeGeek, tell us one of your favorites. Unless anybody have any comments on B12.
No comments on B12. I've not read it. Maybe I should.
Yeah, it's on. I mean, I want to read the whole B series. They do have that. I'm really big on the print on demand stuff just because I'm cheap, and I also like physical copies. And they have a compilation of B1 to 12, but from what I've heard, actually, it might not be 12. It might not include
B1
12.
to 9. The compilation.
B1 to 9. Yeah, so that wouldn't include that anyway. But I also heard that it kind of rewrites things to connect them, and yeah, I don't know if I want that. But it's a thought.
Yeah,
I
should qualify before YeOldeGeek gets started. It is preceded by B11, King's Festival, which is also a pretty weak starting module. I would always recommend, if people are interested in like a module that sort of like introduces both for new players and a new DM, I would always say like go for B1. I still think that's the best teaching tool out there, but there's no reason you can't work around B11. You don't really need it.
You'd say a better teaching tool than Keep on the Borderlands or Village of Hamlet and things like that?
For if you begin, yeah, I would say so. In Search of the Unknown is probably more beginner friendly.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's hear what YeOldeGeek has.
Well, in terms of beginner friendly, do you mean DM beginner friendly or player beginner friendly? Because the one I'm going to come up with now is the one I think is the best one for new players to start with. And that is U1, The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. I think there's never been a better paced adventure. It's got a decent plot that unravels beautifully along the way. It's got a realistic environment. I'm a Brit. I like the environments to be realistic rather than overly fantastical. It's reusable. The house is excellent. The ship is excellent. The enemies in there are well balanced, and they are intelligent. They move around. They react to what the players do. It's got a plot, but it is a location based adventure, which is important. It's not event based. It's location based. And the biggest thing for me is you go into the house and it feels gentle when you first go in. The only dangers when you first go into the house are things that the players themselves bring upon themselves by being rash. So that's what I mean in that way, in terms of teaching the players. And then then eventually they get discovered, all hell will break loose. And then there's this nice little interlude in between. Perfect to bring in the training rules, because if they've played well in the first section, the thieves, the clerics should have enough to get to level 2, which they will need to do for the second part, which is a whole different ball game. But by now, hopefully, they've learned enough about how to play the characters, how to think about it, how to deal with potentially difficult situations in order to cope with part 2, which is an absolute barnstormer.
U1, isn't it kind of like a what do you call it? Isn't it kind of a Scooby-Doo mystery?
Yeah, there is that. That has been a criticism thrown at it, and I feel it depends how you play it. Yes, there are spooky bits, and it all turns out to be quite mundane, as in Scooby-Doo. But I think there's a lot more to it than that complaint that it is just a Scooby-Doo adventure.
Oh, no, I didn't mean it in a pejorative sense. I think I read U1 a long time ago, determined that it was good, but it's interesting to hear your take on it.
I think the Scooby-Doo part of it is what makes it so good, because we drop our players into a fantasy world and we beat it over the head. You're playing a fantasy game when you can do something that isn't led by fantasy, but in reality, like, that's honestly a breath of fresh air, especially if they are newer players and they expect something. If they hear about a haunted house and they go to a haunted house and they find out it's not haunted, it's like, whoa, what's going to happen next? And then the future adventures that you have are truly going to set up, different expectations. And it's always great to subvert your players' expectations.
One other thing that I find is when you've got an environment that feels very authentic, I find that my players relate a lot better to the environment. So naturally, their play becomes more involved in terms of what's going on around them. It's not just another room with a door, whatever. When my last group, when I ran through it, were in the cellar there's that a vat full of rock grubs. They pushed that vat over to the stairs, shoved the vat down the stairs, having taunted all the people in the area below to come running up the stairs. So the people came up the stairs and ran into a vat full of rock grubs.
That is fantastic, though.
It was great. And then when the gnolls arrived to try and help out, they chucked burning oil at them. And they actually got through that. They cleared out that whole bottom section, barely taking a scratch, by being clever and using the environment. And I find that happens a lot more when the adventure has a more grounded feel to it.
Yeah, it's easier to, I guess, sort of anticipate what the properties of all these objects are. Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. But I saw a question popping by in the chat, and it's not what is the I guess what is the best or why you like it, but I think what you bring up is like a trait that people do look for in a good adventure, like opportunities to use the players. To use intelligence, I guess, to use the environment against the against the dungeon.
Exactly.
Hell yeah! All right, no fun. What you got?
Well, I'm going to sound like a scumbag here because y'all have brought out some of the alphabet module, and unfortunately, I'm not going to be bringing out the alphabet module, not natively anyway. My favorite pick is going to be Tomb of Annihilation here, which is a 5th edition adventure But I will say the caveat there is Tomb of Annihilation is in fact several of the alphabet modules thrown into one. It is the Isle of Dread combined with Dwellers of the Forbidden City, combined with Tomb of Horrors, combined with, I'm totally blanking on the last one. Oh my god, what's the one underneath the city? Not Dwellers of the Forbidden City, but
the Shrine
Hidden
of
Shrine of
Tao
Tamotan.
Makan.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all of those wrapped into one, and even though yes, it is 5th edition, it is so easily convertible to any OSR system by literally just changing the stat block here and there, and that's it. And the reason why I love it is because when I look at a lot of the adventure modules that so many things do, they hit 2 of the 3 pillars really well. Sometimes they do exploration really well and combat really well, but then they lack any sort of social play. Or they do great social play and great, exploration, but they lack in combat. And, there's all these various things. But Tomb of Annihilation has all 3 of those pillars so incredibly well. There's a vast jungle. There's a vast jungle to explore. There's so many NPCs to interact with and factions to engage with and enemies to combat and maybe not combat. And then the combat itself, there is a lot of great, not only just combat against monsters, but also combating all the traps and various puzzles and things like that. And for me, right there, the fact that it's got such a great, strong 3 set of pillars there is what makes it my favorite. I've ran it now 3 times. I'm going to run it some more. And I was actually thinking of doing like a solo play of it to kind of showcase off, solo play and various other things like that.
It's a fantastic choice. Like, I haven't run it myself. Really, as far as 5th edition modules go, I've only run pretty much Lost Mines of Phandelver, and I think that's it. But that's Tomb of Annihilation is one that I've read and instantly fell in love with, and I felt like it maintains some old school spirit in it. It just feels like it has all of the adventurous elements that I cherish. Basically, it has. Just reading through some of the NPCs, it's like, well, this one will kill you. This one will kill you. It's just like, and they're just kind of sitting around in the environment, doing their own thing, living their lives. You got all kinds of shady criminal types, and it just feels good. I don't know. But the fact that it does have all that historical stuff from D&D is a definite bonus.
So for the development cycle of Tomb of Annihilation, you could see that before then the previous modules that they've done in regards of, we're gonna have this certain biome and we're gonna have this sort of theme for the adventure, and they did Curse of Strahd. And they expanded Curse of Strahd from I6 Ravenloft, of course, like they did, all the way back in AD&D and all that fun jazz. But but they saw that Ravenloft was a success, so they're like, hey, maybe we should take a little bit of that old school feel. And Tomb of Annihilation did really well. But of course, now that they've done that theme, tone, and setting, they're moving on to other things. And recently now they're moving on to anthologies. I don't know if you saw, but today they just released that they're doing an anthology. So
which all I can say is that at least whenever you present a bunch of not really connected adventures, if they're not connected, then you're bound to hopefully find at least one that you like, that can be useful. So we'll see how it turns out. All right, Party, what you got, man?
Well, I've went ahead and grabbed a number of physical copies of various adventures that I can talk about here. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about Red Prophet Rises, as much as Prince might enjoy that.
God damn
this
it.
one having been produced by him in Melrex. I am tempted to talk about Forgive Us from Lamentations, which I just ran for my player group. And let's go ahead and do that.
Perhaps one of the coolest covers.
Yeah.
Maybe
it's
minimalistic.
My camera will manage to focus. I think it's trying to blur the background.
There we go.
But this one is by Kelvin Green over here for Lamentations. In general, I love the Lamentations modules. I have a few others here, which some of them are perhaps not.
I think the
safe
word
to
you're
stream.
looking for is extremely bad.
Well, some of them are not very good. That's true.
Only some of them. Some of them are, in fact, very good.
But Forgive Us. Honestly, I didn't even think all that highly of it running it at first. But the scenario presented is so good that it makes up for any kind of organizational issues or any problems I had with the specifics of what's in the module. The broad strokes are so good that it didn't matter. We could just make it work, and everyone was going to have a good time. And I think for myself, I mean, coming off of the back of what No Fun Allowed was talking about, he was talking about a big campaign book that could give you a little bit of everything. For my own sake, I'm looking for something tight and concise, like these new Lamentations modules that are these, I don't know what the name of the half-size book is.
Booklets.
Booklets. Okay, sure. So a booklet with 20 or 30 pages, probably half of that is art anyway. That's what I'm looking for. I want something that I can ideally run in one session, maybe 2 sessions. Forgive Us is one that you could potentially. We did it in one session. We did play for about 4 hours and had to cut kind of at the end. I mean, they had gotten to the main room, but they hadn't fully explored everything. So we were just sort of hand waving it to get to the end. But it's something that you could run in 4 hours. And just a very tight scenario where just, that nice mix of the mundane and the fantastic.
Can you run us through, like, what is
Yeah, I suppose I haven't.
Forgive Us about.
I haven't told you the premise whatsoever.
Yeah, for those not in the know, I know it reminded me of Warhammer Fantasy RPG when I read it, like, very strongly.
Yes, that is a good comparison. So I'll just real quick here on the back of the book. In the year 1625, there was a plague. It was a plague year in Norwich. History tells us that it was an outbreak of the Black Death. History is wrong. So the setup is sort of in Norwich. There was some sort of plague outbreak, which I'm not sure that blurb is actually kind of interesting to sell the module to you. But in practice, what the players are going to be doing is they are at least for my own sake, I tried to get the players right into the action. So I said, okay, you're on a mission to go to this bandit hideout and recover a specific item. That's it. That's the setup. Of course, they're going to go in there. They're going to find out that things are not as they seem, which is a perfect setup for any kind of modules to set expectations and then break them.
If I recall right, it's isn't it that you kind of stumble into like someone else's attempt to rob a tomb, right? More or less in Forgive Us.
A tomb?
Oh, sorry, it's not a tomb, but I do recall there was a sort of vault. I've only reviewed it. I haven't played it yet.
Well, the bandits have been quite successful, so they have their own vault of treasures, which is something that the players will encounter. But that's sort of one of the set pieces.
Right.
I mean, in general, the setup is, like I said, very basic, very simple. You can throw this on any group practically in almost any setting. I mean, you don't have to set it in England, and maybe you shouldn't because maybe you're a dumb American who, like myself, who can't pronounce the names of British cities.
Like Norwich.
Yeah. Certainly, I actually didn't do that. I actually just chucked this right into my own setting. Works just fine.
Don't worry, British people can't even pronounce the letter T. So I mean, come on, we got a one up on them.
Only if you're from London. It's Londoners. They're British. But
British.
British. Yeah, by me we pronounce letter T. It's just other things we screw up on.
Anything else you wanted to tell us about Forgive Us?
I think that's gonna do it. Unless you guys have any more questions.
I do have a question. This is a problem that I've had with a lot of Lamentations modules, and I always look for it, and I haven't read that one. Is there money to be retrieved? Because sometimes I've noticed that there's not really any treasure, and it's like it's still a GP for XP system. So
yeah, that's true.
Like,
so Prince happened to bring up the the vault, the bandits have been very successful. So certainly there's the opportunity for the players to walk away with quite a lot of wealth, depending on how they play things out. Now, my own group walked away from the vault itself with virtually nothing, but they're little bunglers. You know, they bungle things quite a bit. They did get.
Oh, isn't it a thing that like once you get to the vault, it kind of becomes a push your luck mechanic, right? Because
Sorry, I am being a little vague because I'm leaving this to, I don't know, maybe I should be more direct about what's in here and just pretend this is all for Dungeon Masters. And
it's the thing from the movie The Thing is in there, basically, like 4 of them, right? Something like that. It's I remember it was like really brutal.
Yes, that's true. So I guess since you've already said it, spoiler alert, forgive us. The reason it's called that is because the bandits have unleashed something that is, like you said, The Thing, basically, from the movie The Thing, 1982, John Carpenter. So there is extreme potential for the scenario to go very wrong if the players are not careful. If they actually unleash the terrors upon the town, the infection can spread extremely quickly. Potentially, this is a very small module that can disrupt your entire campaign setting if there's no ability
but that's
for the greater world to respond.
That's an LOTFP standard, I think. That's it's not an Lamentations module if it doesn't have the potential to either destroy the planet or unleash some sort of serious contagion or problem that kills hundreds or maybe thousands of people. Speaking of which, I think the treasure is they had a sort of weird dip. I think somewhere in the middle of the lifespan of the Lamentations modules, they sort of started getting a little sloppy. But I do know, like, James Radji's modules generally have enough treasure. Forgive Us probably has enough too, and like some of the newer stuff I've read, like they're starting to pay more attention to it again. So it's it can be a little stingy, but it's not egregious to the point where you're like, okay, this is completely bullshit. I've been subjected to this horrible nonsense, and you get coppers to show for it.
I will say the description of it's a bandit lair, right? This is a place where bandits lived.
Hell yes.
All the treasure is in the vault. There is basically nothing described in any of their rooms. Like, nobody has anything stashed under their bed, even. Now, when I ran it, I just added stuff. I'm just like, okay, whatever. This bed has 3d6, cash. This bed has a minor item, whatever. I just sprinkled in some more mundane treasure throughout the majority of the module and then left the vault as is.
To sort of help them carry over. Yeah, I do notice that this happens to, like, I think the newer module authors a little bit more, that people don't seem to realize that in a system where gold is XP and you have like an XP requirement that doubles every time, that like for modules that are like higher level, you really need to like dole out the treasure massively, or they'll never get there. That is like something that's sometimes overlooked.
Yeah, so I guess that's going to segue really well into what I've got, and I guess it's a good thing. So not only is mine also a Lamentations adventure, it is also has a bit of the thing about it. So it is a Stranger Storm. I don't know if y'all have ever looked into that, but it's not, from what I understand, like individually published or anything like that. It's included in the Lamentations Grindhouse Referee book. Basically.
Whoa, that's a deep cut. I didn't even know that existed. Okay.
Yeah,
nice.
It's just in there at the end, and I don't remember how I had heard about it, but once I heard about it, I was like, wow, that sounds cool. And I checked it out. And what's really fantastic about it is it's a great way to start a Lamentations campaign. And really, it does a lot of things really well. It has that whole feeling of unease. There's just tension everywhere, because basically the way it starts, there's this big storm that's going on. You are stopping in the middle of nowhere, just this little tiny hamlet, and you potentially might find a dead body. Actually, I think it's pretty likely that you'll find a dead body in the bushes, And then as the you stop in this inn, and as the days go, or as the day goes on, you start seeing people that are were previously dead, and realizing that they are something that they're not supposed to be. And then you're trying to figure out like who's the real one, because you're seeing two live ones together. And so there's this whole doppelganger thing, and you really don't have as many of the resources, because it's starting adventure, as you might have magically, in order to determine who's the real one, who's the fake one. But they do exist. It is possible. Magic users could use something to figure it out, perhaps, but for the most part, they just have to kind of use their intuition and deductive reasoning. And it's just incredibly tense, because you never know whenever you're about to commit murder, because you suspect that you've got the right answer, but you could be wrong. It does produce opportunities for treasure, which I do appreciate, although it's obtained in a rather gruesome way. It just like goes on like a domino effect. It becomes more and more tense as the stakes go higher and higher. It's not just that now I'm about to potentially murder one person. Now I'm about to, and spoilers and everything, anybody who's running this or playing it, buyer beware, spoilers. But the thing that you're going to eventually get to is they may end up just killing a whole bunch of orphans, if it comes down to it.
Of course, it's not a LOTFP module if you cannot kill several children.
Yeah. I mean,
oh, no.
but the way that it's all written, it's it's difficult to run, which I also appreciated because it kept me on my toes. And it just, man, there's just so many cool things that can unfold from it. The players, they get really into it. As far as it's not complicated, you don't have a whole lot of locations to memorize or anything like that. It's more a sequence of events and then a few NPCs, and just trying to make sure you understand exactly what it's trying to say.
Who wrote this, by the way?
I'm pretty sure it was Raji.
It was James Raji wrote a fucking adventure in 2021. Really?
Well, this was the module from the old Grindhouse edition, wasn't it?
Oh shit!
Yeah.
Okay. Oh damn.
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought I covered all of Raji's stuff. Damn it. Okay. All right.
It's in the way. It's in the referee book.
Go check it out. It's I absolutely
Oh,
love it.
yeah. I recall that there was something in the there were a few sample adventures in the referee book that I haven't taken along. No, I wrote some sort of fucking hagiography, as they called it, but where I just went through all of his adventures, and I did a sort of a summary and a write up of what he was all about. I think I've reviewed everything he's ever done except for that one, I guess. So I should check that out. And adventure number 13, which popularly sucks. How much XP do you get from the orphans? Jesus.
I don't remember. I'm sure it's not a whole lot, but
it gives you enough? Does it give you enough of pointers or extra systems to run this sort of more free flowing explosive situation properly? That's something where
not really.
I notice a lot of modules that kind of drop the ball.
Not really. Not that I remember.
Fair enough.
For the most part, it just kind of explains how it's supposed to work. And then, I remember studying it, and trying to make sense of it, and kind of rehearsing it for myself. How is this going to, because, I didn't want to get it too wrong. And so I don't remember it being that straightforward or it having that particular utility of making itself easy to run. It's not necessarily complicated either. It's just I remember me, having to work at it in order to make sure I pulled it off okay. And it's a one longish session adventure, so it's very cool. All right, Prince, what's your second one?
Well, shit. I didn't know this was going to be a Lamentations promotion stream, but I guess it will be. No, my I noticed.
I won't do any Lamentations.
Won't be for everyone. No. if I look at like what I've actually like run like the most besides B1, there's another one. It's called Tower of the Stargazer by James Raggi IV. I, as of late or later on, I am fairly critical of some of it. I think it's probably one of the worst modules to use, on players that if you're introducing new players to the game, it's probably horrible. There's so many there's so many like really mean-spirited like traps in there that seasoned adventurers will absolutely find. But if you send newbies in there, they'll get absolutely killed. It's the charm of like you have a wizard's tower. Who puts a save or die poison needle trap on like the first door? It's just the door that you enter. It's James Raggi does, right?
That's called Darwinism right there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the idea that they're he's trying to immediately separate the wheat from the chaff by showing you the various like mean-spirited things that a guy can pull up. There's a 10th level wizard in like a circle who offers you a minor reward to like let him go, and if you don't agree, he starts getting fucking angry and shouting at you. It's clearly insane. And I have had like multiple adventures and or multiple runs of that adventure end with people like either trying to kill that wizard and not succeeding, or trying to free the wizard, which also got which was also a big problem. But at the same time, it's filled with like a lot of there's a lot of like weirdness in it, in a sense that sometimes you really get the idea that like this you're really tangling with like say the unknown. So you'll have like magical objects, mirrors or a strange a telescope to like interact with. There's all this. It's a wizard's tower that feels like a wizard's tower. It's not boring. No, it's wonderful. You feel like you're entering the domain of like some man who walks in completely other spheres than you, right? The ending is of course very frustrating. And again, for new players, it's probably too brutal. But at the same time, yeah, I would say for just I don't know, the sheer joy of it, the weirdness, the exploration as well. There's different routes you can discover. It's really quite good. It's a reason I keep coming back to it. And one of the advantages is also it's very low prep. You don't really have to spend a lot of time making notes or whatever. And once you've absorbed the gist of it, you can just kind of like run it off the back of your hand. All you need is like the booklet, and you're good to go.
Man, I'm so glad you chose that. It's funny. I actually, the first time that I ran that, I felt like that those weird wizard elements you were talking about were Lovecraftian. But then I read, I've been reading Vance, and it's actually Vancian in a lot of ways. It feels like Vancian magic users. It's echoes of Iakanu, the laughing magician, having an alien creature in a jar, that he uses to force Kugel into doing a task, by inserting it into his body.
What was it again? He had in the actual tower, there's a pool of acid with weird alien fish, and there's an incredibly convoluted quote unquote puzzle. It's actually very hard. It's quite possible that if you're unwise in your experimentation, you'll end up killing yourself or destroying the telescope. But if you do do everything correctly, you'll end up converting yourself to cosmic rays and projecting yourself onto this alien planet on the other side of the galaxy, where you will promptly get eaten by plant monsters.
Yes.
Again, there's a certain amount of like sadism in there. It's probably not healthy to subject your players to that on a daily basis. But for like just a creative energy, it really is quite fun.
Definitely. All right, YeOldeGeek, what's your number two?
Oh, before I go on to that, I'm just going to say regarding introducing people to a system gently. my most recent group, the first time I taught them AD&D was them playing Tomb of Horrors. That's
Really?
how I taught them how to play AD&D. Yeah.
That's a heck of a learning curve right there.
I was like, hey, it's high-level characters. You're going into Tomb of Horrors. Enjoy.
Isn't that
Anyway.
like saying you're going to learn MMA? You know, and your first sparring session will be with Conor McGregor, and he will he will not hold back.
And he hasn't got any gloves on. All right. I'm glad it's gone in the direction it has, because I was going to ask Aaron if he wanted to monetize this or not, because my second choice is a very adult one, and it is Forget Me Not for Call of Cthulhu from the Things We Leave Behind anthology by Stygian Fox.
I'm gonna try, but we'll see what we get. Just if you keep down the vulgarities, I might get limited at.
Yeah, it's just the subject matter's a little bit unpleasant. It's a modern day scenario, and it's called Forget Me Not because at the start the player characters have no idea who they are, where they are, how they got there, and they just wake up in a van on the side of the road. They don't know who the other people they're with are. Give you an idea of how I started it. I handed my players blank character sheets with nothing filled in whatsoever. I rolled some dice to see who woke up first. The first person woke up. I described the scene, and the player said to me, "Okay, I'm going to check in my pockets. Have I got any ID or a wallet or something?" "You haven't got any pockets. You're wearing a skirt." "Oh, I'm female." So he started filling, and that's how we started filling in the character sheets. The scenario, there are going to be spoilers, unfortunately, because there's no real way to describe this one without too many spoilers. But the scenario is that they're all members of a TV crew who've been making a documentary on the sort of haunted house type, cheesy hauntings type documentaries. They've been making one of those, and they are abducted during the making of the documentary, and they flee in their van and they crash, and their minds are wiped, and they have to find out who they are, and through a series of dreams and recollections that are triggered by certain things happening to them and certain places they visit, they slowly learn what's happened to them. All they know at the beginning is they've all got sore throats. And what has actually happened is an alien entity has inserted a tentacle deep into their stomachs and infested them with its broodlings, which are slowly growing. If they look in a mirror, they see something moving under their skin. If they go to the toilet, it moves. And my players were doing things like taking laxatives to try and crap them out, eating raw food to try and throw them up, and smoking loads and loads and loads of weed in order to try and smoke them out, which in turn only made the sanity losses even worse. And one other thing, I mean, Call of Cthulhu scenarios are often quite linear, quite railroady, and quite difficult to digest when you're actually reading them. This one is an absolute breeze to read. It's very open. Once they get back to the town, they've got complete freedom to move around the town, which involves a lot of improvisation from the part of the DM. But because it's such an easy adventure in terms of the layout compared to a lot of other Call of Cthulhu scenarios, it's easy to do. And with it being set in the modern day, as I said in my Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh comment, they can relate to the surroundings, which is why, for example, they tried to find two skater bros to score weed off them and things like that in order to try and smoke them out. And the way it's all slowly unraveled, and the speed at which sanity was lost as well. If you play a long Call of Cthulhu campaign, it's often a drip, drip, drip of sanity loss. And a lot of short scenarios do fail in terms of the sanity impact, because they still apply that drip, drip, drip style of sanity loss. In Forget Me Not, if your characters have got more than 50% of their starting sanity left at the end of one session, you're probably playing it wrongly. It absolutely savages the sanity. And most of my players were having to roleplay characters with 2 or more phobias. By the end of the first session, their sanity took an absolute hiding, and it was what a short, sharp, horrific, and very adult Call of Cthulhu scenario should be, in my opinion. It's got things of alien aspects of Alien to it in terms of the things growing inside them. They never knew if it was going to burst out of them or what, and the palpable panic because they don't know how long they've got to live. They just know that something is growing inside them and multiplying. It's sick, twisted, and absolute genius. It's the first scenario I gave 10 out of 10 to on my review channel.
Pretty cool. What
That
would you
sounds
say?
badass.
I think the thing is with Call of Cthulhu. I think I've played it once, right? For me, it's hard to sort of find a standard for like what would you say, makes a good Call of Cthulhu scenario, because I feel it's very different from like the Dungeons and Dragons.
I find with Call of Cthulhu, it's very hard to know what a good scenario is by just reading them through initially. You can get an idea, but I've had some that have read brilliantly and have fallen flat. One example of that, and I know a few people highly rate it, is Mr. Corbett, because it has to be set up in a certain way. It's lovely to read. It's wonderfully sick
But
how it.
When you say
built
it's falling flat,
Frankenstein baby out of body parts. It's fantastic, but it requires so much setting up in terms of getting the players invested in the location beforehand for it to work. I didn't do that. I failed in that sense. I didn't do it. It didn't work out so well.
so
Whereas other
when does it work? Like in your opinion, you're saying like, okay, it fell flat. So when is a Call of Cthulhu scenario successful, right?
When there is palpable tension at the table, when the players are genuinely the players themselves, because the right way to run ignore what Wizard of the Coast say. The right way to run a horror scenario is to get the players on edge.
Yeah, they have to be invested. Yeah, of course, and like kind of
they've got to be on edge. They've got to have that sense of nervousness, and you have got to make them feel a bit sick sometimes to get the horror come through. And it works for me if I come away from the session thinking they were genuinely panicky at times.
All right, hardcore, nice.
Yeah, I definitely want to run that now someday.
Well, of course, I mean, some of us are such good DMs because our players always feel sick. Whenever they have a game. I mean, my players always feel sick.
That's just because they're looking at your face. I mean,
it's exactly. It's like my voice, the way I talk.
All right, no fun. What's your number 2?
So I, piggybacking off of Call of Cthulhu here by not doing Call of Cthulhu at all, I'm actually going to be covering a Mothership module. For those of you that don't know, Mothership is a sci-fi, gritty, kind of system. It's got sanity and horror, and
it's kind of aliens-y, right? Is
it's not.
Is that a fair
comparison? Yeah. So it's like Aliens in the sense that aliens are like very, very rare. Like it's humanocentric sci-fi setting. And the module that I wanted to cover is Dead Planet. So the synopsis of Dead Planet is, as you're just traveling from one system to another like you normally do, all of a sudden your ship gets sucked out of orbit, and your ship is broken, and now you are in this humongous, basically just a graveyard of ships that are now floating around. There's thousands and thousands of other ships that are floating around this planet, and you're stuck there because your ship's busted. So then you start exploring around the other ships that are in orbit, or you go down to the planet itself and discover the terrible things going on there. And the reason I like it is because, one, it's always great to throw your players into a scenario and tell them, hey, escape. That's it. And when you say that, when you present them a sandbox, you present them a whole bunch of scenarios. It's such a breath of fresh air when you get different players, because different players are going to approach it differently. Some people are going to say, hey, let's go check out all the other ships that are around in orbit. Hey, let's go down to the planet. Maybe the planet's got something going on. Oh, hey, let's go check out that moon right there. We're getting some weird readings on that moon. And the module itself, it provides a whole bunch of random tables for generating ships. It provides a whole bunch of great interactions for your players to explore around on the moon and on the planet itself. And it presents a number of ways for your players to get out of this whole scenario. And that's honestly the best thing, is because I find that a lot of times with a lot of adventures, it may start out with a humongous like idea of, hey, all you got to do is escape, do whatever you want. But that it always usually ends up being there's only one way to accomplish that goal. What I like about this is there's a lot of different ways to accomplish that goal. So it's really up to your player's agency on how they tackle this whole scenario.
Can I there's two things that really interest me. The first one is, are there also like locations where the players explore and it's just a death trap? Like it just sucks to go there. It's like the wrong place to go.
I would say not natively. Like there's no air quote the most wrong way to go, but there's definitely things where you would probably want to go to area A before going to area C, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, fair. No, yeah, that's one of the things I think are actually kind of interesting about if you have an open-ended adventure with lots of different areas to cover. Suddenly, if you make one of those areas just really bad, and you kind of drop subtle hints that people shouldn't go there, that suddenly becomes like a viable option because players can always retreat, right? If your adventure is more linear, you're a huge asshole for doing that. But like if they're exploring and they see something and it seems kind of shitty, but they ignore their instincts and they go anyway. Suddenly that becomes like an interesting option, right? You just whatever, you spring a terrible location on them. And the second one, I was kind of interested. How do they do something with like your suit supply of air or something? I feel
so
like
Mothership
the space
has
equivalent of torchlight or food or whatever.
Yeah, so Mothership has a whole system on you need to eat, you need to drink. Your ship has fuel. Your ship has oxygen. And so while like you can't jump out of whatever, you can't jump out of the system, you can still travel around a little bit, and that's where part of that exploration comes from. It's like, okay, we're running out of oxygen. Let's go, plunder another ship. And you go to another ship, and it's like, oh, hey, cool. They've got some scrap that we can use to repair our ship. They've got some oxygen that we can leech off of. That
does sound fun.
Stuff like that. And then so that's what presents a lot of the challenge is that when you run this, depending on how vindictive of a game master that you are,
Maximum vindication, yeah, like the worst.
You can definitely have it be where your players are having to scrounge for every little resource, or they just kind of hop around and go wherever they want. Really up to you. I've ran it different ways, and one thing I like is they explore around the other ships, get other ship parts. But then when they want to go and explore the moon or they want to explore the planet itself, then it presents a whole bunch of strange scenarios.
Cool.
All right, party. What you got?
Well, I think I'll round us off with another rare one that probably no one has heard of before. Well, maybe that'll be fun. We'll see if anyone has heard of it. But this will be something more, bringing it back, I suppose, into the realm of strict D&D. Although this is a module that you could pretty much run with any system. In fact, it's systemless. It's actually in a magazine. A magazine I'm really not all that familiar with, but apparently there was a magazine called Shadis, which you're not going to be
deep cut. Hot damn.
Probably not going to be able to read this, but on the cover here, it says, Code of the Rats. The only introductory fantasy adventure you will ever need. And of course, they're going to say that to sell their magazine, but they're not kidding. This is a really good one. And it's
bold claim.
What's that?
Bold claim.
Yes. The reason that I like it so much, if you might think of this as a first level Tomb of Horrors. The sort of module, if you were going to run a campaign that ended with Tomb of Horrors, you would start here to teach your players the skills they would need to defeat a dungeon like Tomb of Horrors. In fact, the setup is quite literally, it's a little heavy-handed. Basically, the suggestion is that your party presumably bumbles into some foolishness, angering a witch who is going to decide to punish you all by putting you into her magical gauntlet. So that is a little heavy-handed there, but it is a very good magical gauntlet. The every room is designed specifically around testing the players in some specific way, teaching them the basic skills to not just rush forward blindly, but also not to be idlesome either. There's a little bit of everything from a dungeon crawling perspective. Like every little dungeon crawling skill, a room will typically test in excess, and there will be later rooms, of course, that confirm, did you learn the lesson you were supposed to learn? And if not, you're going to run into some trouble. Probably the main gimmick for the thing as a whole is at the beginning, the players can screw up and die, and they will just reappear fine. And that mechanic, they only actually have a certain number of free lives, which go away after a while with no immediate or direct indication. The players can kind of figure that out, but
until one of them dies, it doesn't come back.
Until one of them dies, it doesn't
come back. That's I like that actually. Yeah, hell yeah, raise the stakes.
That is cool.
Yeah. If they make it far enough, they can find some clues that will indicate that maybe they do have limited lives. But if they're really screwing up early on, they're going to have no chance of figuring it out before that time comes. One of the interesting things about this module is it actually has a scoring system associated with it, which I kind of like from like the old tournament style modules. Yep. I offered my players a gift card for whoever had the most points at the end of the module. So of course there was then a bunch of arguing about, well, wait, I should have earned more points for this particular room or what have you. But that one's probably, I suppose I didn't exactly look, but I think it's at least 30 rooms.
I'd never heard of Shadows Magazine, actually, before you mentioned it. This is pretty cool.
I honestly have no idea how I even discovered this. I must have been searching online for starting adventures that people were recommending. And somehow somebody had discussed a module where the players can get extra lives with these white feathers. So in addition to the previous mechanic I mentioned, there's a mechanic where the players, if they are doing exceptionally well, above and beyond well, they can potentially earn extra lives from various rooms.
So it sounds a little like I always think extra lives are a little meta, but at the same time, adventures that are really based around like player skill and like just playing the game instead of like trying to set an atmosphere or telling a story. We haven't had that for a while, so it might be really
part
good.
Of it is that the module is systemless, so it doesn't really care about your hit points. It's either just going to kill you or whatever, or not at all.
Oh, okay. Wait, now I'm more suspicious. So does that means like you either solve the puzzle or you get like completely wiped out?
So as an example of one puzzle, there is a tunnel filled with a mysterious slimy black substance which smells, and the players of course have torches which they've been using to see and go around.
Right.
The foolish players will go right down the tunnel with their torch, which actually doesn't have a problem in the first half of the tunnel because it's some sort of inert substance. The second half of the tunnel is a flammable substance which then is capable of igniting the previous side of the tunnel. The player is, of course, obliterated by the amount of fire.
Sounds it's starting to sound a little grim-tooth trappy there. I don't know.
Yes, this I can't remember exactly how the players are intended to figure that one out, but I found that every puzzle was fair. The puzzles felt fair, except for one. There's one puzzle later in the dungeon which my players were. It wasn't even that it wasn't fair. It's just that they were like, how would we ever figure this out besides brute forcing it? And they do, and then my group did brute force it. But every other puzzle, my group, they were content. And I think I've run this one twice.
That one puzzle in particular, would it be possible to think it out, or
it wasn't even, mostly it was just boring because there wasn't even really a threat involved. They just had to kind of brute force check every wall while they're like dangling around in this shaft. So it wasn't so much a danger as the puzzle I don't know. It just didn't land for our group.
Well, you said something about Tomb of Horrors for first level. I kind of want to remark on Tomb of Horrors a little bit. I think Tomb of Horrors makes perfect sense as a sort of final exam for low to mid-level characters that have reached high level, and then like Tomb of Horrors is Gary Gygax's way of saying, did you actually earn those levels? We're going to test we're going to, what is it, stress test your dungeon crawling fundamentals. Let's see if and if you understand all the abilities that you have acquired, if you've played properly, right, if you've earned those levels, you might make you might make it through.
Absolutely,
it's very meticulous.
Absolutely spot on. Because if you've got to those levels, you're expected to have learnt everything and beyond of what your characters are capable of. Because there are so many difficult high-level adventures where you've got to be more than just a competent player to get through them. And Tomb of Horrors is like, right, okay, you've come through those levels, you've come through those adventures. How much do you really know about sorting out a dungeon? How much do you really know about being an adventurer? It pushes it to the
people complain about Tomb of Horrors has been out for a while, right? Like, I'm gonna assume that anybody watching this knows a little bit about like the first room, but there's of course the infamous trapdoors with poison spikes in the first room, but they actually warn you about trapdoors with poison spikes in the actual rumor tables of the dungeon. So if your cleric doesn't have neutralized poison prepared to like bail you out, you done goofed. So like it's putting a trapdoor with like lethal poison spikes at the bottom in a innocuous hallway for like lower level characters is completely unfair and unprecedented. But like if you put it in the rumors,
yeah,
and if the players then go in and they don't have that prepared, then it's like totally fair because they should have seen that coming.
If the players don't bother trying to find out about the place, if they don't bother consulting sages, then they failed. They have failed because at the very start they need to learn about where they are going. That is rule one of old school adventuring, in my opinion. Find out as much as you can about where you're going to go. It's certainly if you're playing the part of a high level adventurer. And if you find out you are going to a trap-filled dungeon with something that may have once been a lich in the depths of it, you don't go with fireballs and lightning bolts. You go with fine traps. You go with summons type
augury, clairvoyance. Yep.
Yeah, commune, contact higher plane, legend lore, fate object, levitate, fly. You go with those sort of spells instead to aid you to move around, find things, and ask questions. It's not an adventure for magic missiles and fireballs.
I was going to ask, no fun allowed. Actually, you're you've run Tomb of Annihilation a couple of times. Have you ever checked out? Probably you have checked out Tomb of Horrors, but have you ever checked out Return to the Tomb of Horrors?
I have not personally ran it, no, but I have read through it.
So Tomb of Horrors, but also Return to the Tomb of Horrors.
Yeah, I've ran Tomb of Horrors multiple times.
Oh, cool.
Not Return.
Oh, okay.
Same.
I would say, yeah. So Tomb of Horrors, like, barring the 5th edition version, because that obviously neutered some of the kill aspects of it.
3rd edition was the same, yeah.
But yeah, the original Tomb of Horrors, it definitely has that mentality of it doesn't matter what level you are, you can complete it. Except, of course, if you are higher level, then you do have just more flexibility. If you're bringing level 1 wizards, you can't levitate around, and you can't. The level 1 acrobat isn't as powerful and stuff like that. But
no, you're going to get wiped out.
But what I will say though is I'm trying to remember. When that Tomb of Horrors came out, there was obviously the sex change trap. Did that affect strength, or was that after they fixed that.
That's very discretionary, right? In
I can't
AD&D
remember.
first edition, I think there was a strength limit for ladies.
There was a strength limit. There was no strength penalty.
18 slash
Penalty,
50.
okay.
Yeah, but that's
So
not going
that-
to matter.
That's something that seems to have come into the sort of rumors about AD&D. There was never a strength penalty for female characters in AD&D. Get that out there.
Well,
There was a strength limit, and that could be exceeded through magic. And it affected a very small percentage of player characters anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. It always this is an aside, right? But this strength limit stuff, I always assumed the adventurers were non-standard anyway, so it doesn't really matter if you're like if you have a lady with 18/00 strength, it's not gonna affect the what is it, the credibility of your entire fantasy world to have one exceptional character, so it doesn't really matter.
If you think about it, though, the net effect in the end tended to be pretty much zero on the stats of the characters in terms of penalizing.
Yeah, because you already needed exceptional strength. Like 18 strength would already be rare. You'd have to be some sort of fighter, and then it's percentile based. Yeah.
All it really did was it made the world, the parties consist of a higher percentage of female thieves, clerics, and mages,
Which I guess makes sense.
And a higher percentage of male fighter types. That's the only effect it would really have had initially on setup. Because if you'd rolled an 18 and you wanted to play a fighter, you'd probably play a male, or but you had to want to. It would only affect you if you wanted to play a female fighter. Anybody else, it wouldn't affect it. It would just steer you away. So you had more female clerics and characters like that, and it wasn't a problem. It wasn't the problem that people make it out to be at all.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So my last one is going to be actually no fun. You could actually show them because you had it handy, and I don't have my physical copy handy, but it was Moon Slaves of the Cannibal Kingdom by Edgar Johnson.
Hell yeah!
It's a Dungeon Crawl Classics module, and for me, it just has everything that I love. Like just all kinds of really, really awesome stuff in one small package that also just has a ton of room in it. So the whole setup is that you arrive on this set of islands where you've got these three. I believe it's three. It's been a while since I've run it. Thank you for showing the map. Yeah, so you have these islands, and you have these three sisters that all three of them are representations of the different alignments. So you have the lawful, the neutral, and the chaotic sisters. They're all goddesses, and the lawful and the chaotic ones are at war with each other. The neutral one, of course, is just kind of trying to keep them from killing each other, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. And the party gets the opportunity to, number one, enter however they will, which is one of my favorite things in any kind of module, is just having multiple entrances. I kind of loathe whenever there's just one way in. And with this being an open-ended thing, there are all kinds of different places where they can land their ships and start exploring. It has a lot of open area for them to explore, a lot of places for you to fill in your own stuff. But even then, it's not one of those that leaves too much open. The stuff that they do have is really, really fantastic. One of the first encounters that we had whenever I ran it was with these golden tribal halfling people that were, I don't know, they were just kind of eccentric the way that I remember them. And it was fun to portray them, but they serve the lawful goddess, and immediately they're being brought into this whole cosmic conflict on this tiny scale, and they get the opportunity to explore the island, and what do they encounter? Well, it entirely depends on which direction they go, which, they have some kind of like general ideas, I guess you can give them, which is what I did. I kind of did the effect of rumors more or less, but they go one way, they encounter a giant gorilla that's incredibly intelligent and wants to pay them to get them off the island, which is really awesome. You take them one way, and the lawful one is going to give them all kinds of incentive to go and kill the other one, and then same thing in the other direction. The encounters are well built, the creatures are cool. I remember there being some pretty cool some pretty cool things to interact with. You have to track the moon.
Is that a sort of metal creature composed of blocks and cubes? This is sounding very Abraham Merritt esque. I don't know if you guys how good your Appendix N is. This sounds very Abraham Merritt, like one of the big inspirations for D&D.
It's really cool. Like that entire thing is actually very important, and if the players destroy it, there can be disastrous consequences. And there's a lot of treasure there. There's a lot of stuff that they can learn, a lot of really cool things to interact with. It's just a damn fun module, and I love it. The only like downside I would say is the that center area, the sunken section that was shown on the map. It really just kind of it gives you like a little random encounter thing, and then it just kind of says, well, you could bring in stuff from this module or this module or this module, which is actually really useful, but at the same time, that might be a turnoff for some people. For me, I was kind of like, damn it, I have to do some more work. But that's okay. It's still it's worth the juice is worth the squeeze, I would say.
As long as there's no mechanic that says pick a book on your shelves, an RPG book, and go to a random page.
No, it's specifically
unforgivable page.
It specifically references some official DCC modules, as well as I think some third-party ones as well.
Okay. It's very nice.
Yeah, Purple Sorcerer. I think the one of his things is in there as a suggestion, but it's fantastic. Okay, so we covered our two favorites, each of us. We have a lot of really cool comments to go over. Is there anything that y'all wanted to discuss before we do that?
Well, what I want to say is we went over our favorite modules, but that implies that we were going over, or we all just automatically assumed that it was published modules. I'm willing to bet our favorite modules are the ones that we created. I'm willing to bet that our favorite adventures, our favorite sessions, the players that have enjoyed whatever game the most have been the things that we've created. Not what some words on some random page did, but what we did. Collaborative.
Well, I mean, I think that's it's probably accurate in the sense that, right, you have such an intimate connection with material that you've made yourself, right? And you can, because it's alive in your head, basically, you can like breathe that life into it and run it in a way that's it's like perfect. But yeah, I would say probably I do enjoy running like my own shit for my players as well. So yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, so speaking of that, so I'm writing down my modules. I ran a whole bunch of stuff and I didn't write about it, but now I am full blown writing the games that I'm running. So are all you all following suit? Are you all writing down actual cohesive, coherent notes and actual adventures yourselves?
Sometimes I try to, but I'm not very good at it.
I've published 2 so far. So like one with one other guy, Red Prophet Rises. It's currently Electrum bestseller on DriveThruRPG. And I also had a Kickstarter for an adventure called Palace of Unquiet Repose, which also did pretty well. I have different versions, so it's which I unfortunately split. So now it's double silver bestseller, single bronze bestseller because we did the various conversions. But yeah, no, running that one has been a blast. My home group is currently inside that one, so hopefully I'll get some good scalps and good moments out of that as well. But I would say, yeah, totally write it down. I publish, even if not for money, just like free on your blog. Hell yeah, it's one of the best ways for like newcomers, I think, to learn about this hobby is to just see what other people have done. It's just that I find converting something that you've made so that another person can use it, that's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only problem.
I agree. Yeah, I've written a few now for others, but I haven't. I published one and then unpublished it because I wanted to fix it. I didn't feel like it was ridiculous, but I had this whole thing that I was gonna die. So all of a sudden, so I was like, I gotta get this out there.
I'll it's a little gauche to do it on stream, but if you ever wanna send it to me, you can run it past me.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. I'll do that. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's definitely there's a whole lot of love for it. Like, I would love nothing more than to just run that stuff. Again, it's all just super cool. And you were talking about one-page dungeons and how terrible they were before. But whenever I've done my own one-page dungeon. That was a badass one-page dungeon, buddy.
Yeah, but the thing is that one-page dungeon in your head is a 10-page dungeon because all the information, all the underlying information, you understand exactly like the root of everything there, right? If you write your one encounter there and you say 2 ogres, pleasure, right? Price 200 GP, you understand exactly what's going on there. There's entire pages worth of lore in your mind about that stuff. No, but like all kidding aside, yeah, of course, like you can for your own shit, you can easily make a one-page dungeon because you understand the origins of your own ideas. But I think probably one-page dungeons work. I feel there's something missing very often because it's just difficult to compress all of the information you need to inject life into an adventure into a single page and then include the map. I find most of them are kind of like hollow or shallow.
I think it would be an interesting format to do one-page dungeon plus all of the information that you need.
Well, so like in the earlier days of the hobby, right? You had the Dungeoneer, which was a judges guild. It's like one of the first third-party D&D publishers. You had the Dungeoneer, which was a magazine, and you had White Dwarf, which later, of course, was devoted exclusively to Warhammer miniatures. But the earlier issues had a lot of adventures that were maybe between 2 and 4 pages, and those were really good. So it's totally possible, but I think there is a certain point where it's you can't infinitely compress information. There is a certain point where you're going to lose a lot of complexity, right?
Well, we're forgetting that we're adhering to this whole page, of 11 by 8 and 12 font. What if we have a huge page with tiny font?
Yeah,
the sky's the limit.
Of course. Yeah,
I mean,
cheating. Yeah, like we're going to do the font of like whatever the font size is going to be 1, right? Like so, we,
you got to bust out the magnifying glass to read this.
Well, there is a grain of truth in like what you're saying, by the way, that a lot of these smaller dungeons they use monsters from the monsters manual, right? So it's like you're referencing another source, I think,
right.
which is key. That like totally if you use stuff that has already been published and might even have like errata, right? It's already in the library of D&D. You're kind of just writing a reference to a block of text that you don't have to reprint in your dungeon adventure. So probably if you're going to do a one-page dungeon, it makes sense to not use a lot of like unique creatures or stuff that you have made yourself, because that's going to cost you like precious words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I pulled it off. What were you saying? YeOldeGeek?
Yeah, I said everything has to be pretty standard if you're going to keep it short. I mean, as the shortest I think I've run and really sort of fleshed out is 8 pages, which is something like G1, Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, and that is such a massive module in just 8 pages.
G1 is fantastic.
It's absolutely superb. There's so many little, if you read it properly and look at the layout, there's so many little hooks and tricks in there, and there's so much good stuff in there for a DM to work with. And I think we spun it out to about 25 hours of play. It was absolutely superb. 8 pages of text.
But what I like about G1 too is that if you go in there spoiling for a fight, basically you get absolutely obliterated. Yeah, you really just you get absolutely crushed. You really have to be kind of subtle about it. And there's ways to bypass certain encounters. I think they had a courtyard which was filled with dire wolves, and I think if you had the whip of like one of the animal trainers or something, then you could use that to like bypass all the animals. That sort of stuff is there too. There's a lot of subtle hints that are or subtle treasures that are disguised somewhere. There's even a procedure for setting fire to the steading itself, which is really hard. Yeah, like G1
my players quickly found out that most of the guards were drunk and took full advantage of that.
Yeah, but only the first time. If you come back a second time, they're actually on full alert.
Until you get them drunk again.
What they did was they murdered a lot of the women and children and planted the evidence on the drunk guards, and then retreated from the steading and waited to see what happened. So what's going to happen in a hill giant lair when the chief discovers that all these women and kids have been murdered, and it looks like the guards have gone on a drunken rampage? It's going to kick off.
But that's what I think. Kind of, you should be trying to do that at higher levels. I kind of feel you should take that into account when you're making an adventure for higher levels. That like players, they aren't going to basically knock on the front door and then say, hello, giants. We are here to take your lair, and we will fight you in honorable combat. So please form, appropriate ranks, and we will exchange blows. No, if you tackle it like in a dumb manner, you should die. You should have to, rely on your all the ingenuity that you've built up over these long levels of play.
It's not necessarily punishing bad behavior; it's rewarding good behavior.
That's what I always say to my players as well. Like when they're crying, like, "Why are you so mean? Why do I feel like this?" It's like, I'm not punishing the bad ones, man. Okay, you cannot have love without hate. Okay, you cannot have success without failure.
All right, let's touch on some of these comments. Okay, anybody can jump in on any of them that they like, but I'm gonna put some up here. So I just think this is a really cogent point that rings true for me. I don't know about y'all. Total Party Skills says, I'm of the opinion that starting adventures are really the only adventure you need to focus on. If done right, everything else will spill out of it to form a campaign.
Yeah, so in regard to that, so like I've got several of the DCC 0th level adventures, right? Those typically do form a great basis for the beginning of a campaign. So if we look at, the classic Sailors in the Starless Sea, the survivors come out, maybe they're a little bit richer, but now their village has been jacked up because a bunch of people have dead. So now they have a sense to move forward. One of my most favorites is this one right here, Feast of the Gobbler Witch, which is it was a holiday module. But that one in particular, they start off on an island and a whole bunch of people are dying. And if they solve the issue, then the issue of the monster, then they're still stuck on this island. Where do they go from there? And that right there just causes a whole bunch of great information. I think a lot of early levels, not necessarily 0th level, but first, second level adventures really should and will dictate how players perceive their characters in the world and how the world shapes to them.
Village of Homlet being a perfect example.
Absolutely. Village of Halma, right there, they show up to this place, and it's like, okay, we got to deal with some cultists, and there's some bandits, and oh, hey, by the way, there's a big old snake monster, right? But then we get this cool. Once we cleared all the monsters, then we get a cool little keep. What are we gonna do with that? And oh, hey, maybe some people want that, take it from us, and what else is out there? Those definitely lead to further adventure for sure.
I don't agree with the starting adventures are the only adventure you need to focus on. I think probably they are more important, right? In the sense that you're going to this is going to be the vessel through which you introduce players to your campaign. But ideally, the most significant thing that they end up doing is not going to be in the beginning. You're going to have to ramp it up. So after a couple of sessions, maybe you raise the stakes a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was also going to add on. Yeah, so the early adventures will, really show off what the characters are, and then later adventures are going to show how the characters influence the world, right? Once you do start busting out those high-level adventures, 5th, 6th, 7th level, depending on whatever system that you're using, right? Those adventures you're going to seed them a little bit, but you're going to have to change them drastically. The early adventures, you really don't usually need to do too much other than you just need to have the lead and be good. But the later adventures, you do typically have to adjust quite a lot because your players are going to be vastly different than what the adventure expected. A lot of these adventures are, just written in a very vanilla text, but you are going to have to add the flavor.
Well, I think, when you, I'm speaking of, I assume also people make their own shit. Maybe not necessarily. Doesn't really matter. I think the first couple of the first couple of adventures, kind of, especially if you have new players, you're acclimating those players to your style of game, right? You're sort of setting the standard. They're finding their feet, right? They're getting used to their they're learning the basics, right? They're slowly accumulating in power and strength, and then at some point when they reach a certain plateau, they start to usually they die a little bit less, they get more success. They go into that cruising mode, right? And then then the game starts to open up. They've got plenty of wealth. They have more opportunity. They start to build connections, and then that's the point where you can really cut loose. And I think really the D&D is a sort of arms race between you and the players, right? They're constantly if you do it properly, you're putting a little pressure on them. They get better. They learn how to play the game, and then you raise the stakes, or you introduce some new complication. You have to keep pushing them.
Yeah. So he also says Basic Fantasy's Black Apple Brew should get more love. I don't know if y'all have read it. I skimmed it and I thought it was awesome. I mean, so far all of the Basic Fantasy modules I've skimmed have been really, really solid stuff, and I love the formatting. It's looks like it's easy to run. I haven't run them though. I don't know if any of y'all run it.
I've heard really good things about them, but it's. I think Basic Fantasy came out in the the earlier days of the OSR, and because it's free, it doesn't have a lot of art. It's sort of fallen by the wayside. It was, I guess, kind of supplanted by Labyrinth Lord and now by OSE. So it's sort of an obscure branch. But I have heard that some of those adventures are really good.
Speaking this blasphemy about Basic Fantasy, I don't like it.
Speaking of OSE, they bring in a casual $698,000 on their Kickstarter with 68 hours left.
Holy shit!
And mind you, that's 698,000 by 5,769 backers. So off the top of my head, each person is on average giving 120-ish, somewhere around there.
Yep. Somebody's been hunting whales. Well done.
I will. I'm gonna do the math on that right now.
I'll be right back.
I need to know.
I'll be right back.
Okay. It's yeah, it's old school essentials, cool, cool reproductions of BX with some interesting ways to add some rules from AD&D to add a little bit of complexity. My biggest thing, the reason that I instead am kind of focusing on basic fantasy is more just because it's easier to get a hold of. It's a lot cheaper. Even though like that way, whenever my players are wanting to get their own copies and stuff like that, they're not having to scramble.
I just want to say I almost had a Rain Man moment because it's actually each person donated $121 on average.
Oh man, that was
I
close.
was that close.
Yeah, which if I remember correctly, that's at least all the books. I want to say that's at least all the books because I think it's $100 to get classic and advanced. It's like $60 to get either or. Because I thought about it because I already have most of it, but I was kind of like, do I want to complete the set by just buying all of it, or I was like, I changed my mind. I decided
and as you mentioned, they're adding some new stuff in there like tieflings.
Yeah, it's not tiefling, it's tiefling. You got T, fling it.
Well, I say that purely just
just to agitate.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
tiefling in it.
The tiefling and the dragonborn, and then there's some other one I think, perhaps.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I mean that's kind of my sentiment. It's let's see. This is another interesting prompt. Votes for best favorite adventure included with a core rule book.
Ooh,
that's hard for me because a lot of the ones that I have don't have included adventures.
Technically, one of your two choices was from a core rule book.
That's correct.
The Lamentations
Storm of the Century. Yep.
But it's not actually in there. That's in the referee grindhouse thing, which is like, I mean, I guess you could say it was part of the box set, but even then, there aren't really a lot of rules in the referee thing. It's just like how to be a referee.
The adventure for Warhammer Fantasy First Edition, the name escapes me, but like the one included in the core rulebook is pretty good.
So from the D&D front, the two major ones would be Keep on the Borderlands and oh my god, what's the 5th edition one?
Lost Mines of Fandelver.
Lost Mines,
yeah. I'd have to go with that as well.
My vote set one would be X1 Isle of Dread. Came with the Moldvay Cook box.
Did it really? Oh, that's awesome. I did not know that.
And Insider will be the Haunting for Call of Cthulhu.
The Haunting's really good. Haunting's pretty good.
Yeah, but here's the thing: Lost Mines of Fandelver came in the starter kit. It didn't come with the core rule book. I'm being a pedant here. Is it actually printed inside the core rule book?
Okay, if we're gonna okay. Fine.
Yep, owned.
I'm prepared to interpret it as the adventure they released in order to sell the game. Anything associated with like the initial release is good by me. The Warhammer Fantasy is the Oldenhaller contract.
That's the one. Yes,
I believe
correct.
is set
that
in
one rocks.
Nuln.
It is.
For my own sake, I don't know that I've paid much attention to them. I do agree that many people have mentioned Fandelver, which is very good. Probably one of the only 5e modules I'm a big fan of. But I don't know. I guess I'm willing to say the Eberron adventure for 3rd edition, even though it really isn't that good in terms of like old school play. It's very heavy-handed and has a lot of dorky stuff in there. But for setting up the pulp noir setting and just having lots of people just BSing the party, basically, like everyone's trying to manipulate you into doing what's in their best interests, like any good pulp noir story has. It does have that, but that's Eberron, so you kind of have to like if you decided to run Eberron, you're probably going to play that anyway, so it's not really like you're so enthralled by the adventure that you're going to decide to run Eberron. It's sort of the reverse.
So I'm gonna something to start you off. Yeah, all right, fair.
I'm gonna go with a weird one. Well, not weird, just I guess probably not as common. And I haven't actually run it. I haven't even run the system, but I've been dying to. I just haven't had the opportunity yet. Strange Tales of Song Ling. It has an adventure included in it at the inside the core rulebook, guys. And not only that, but it is actually really cool. The whole thing is it's the trying to emulate the genre of Chinese ghost stories, basically. And so the way that it's presented, it's very digestible for the people that like dungeon crawl formats, but at the same time, it's presented in a way that has a sequential. It's digestible. Again, I haven't run it yet, but reading it, it just filled me with all kinds of inspiration, and I'm just like, oh, I want to run it. I want to run it because it just looks really, really, really cool. So that one is that's the one I would go with. Let's see. We mentioned Isle of Dread here, and so did Total Party Skills, saying it is a classic goat that starts him off blindly dropped off on a tropical beach.
Actually, you got a rumor, and there's several other hooks to get there.
No, you don't. You find a treasure map, right?
Yeah.
The whole idea is you find a diary or a treasure map by like some sort of asshole captain. You gotta somehow like find your way there. You either charter a ship or build it. I always thought that was a great idea to sort of tempt the more high-level players, so 3rd to 5th level, like to sort of tempt them into spending, their accumulated wealth into equipping an expedition like that. But yeah, that's really good. That's still on.
Who wants to do this actually?
Prince, I think, has run this, haven't you?
35 sessions long. Yeah, I would have. That would have been my pick instead of Stargazer. But I like Carcosa is it's more like and it heavily modifies the core rules of either OD&D or Lamentations of the Flame Princess, depending on like what you use, to such an extent that I would say it's like its own game. So yeah, Carcosa is a fucking blast. Some sort of sword and planet Lovecraftian horror setting on it feels like John Carter on methamphetamines. Running it is really great. You're going to have to probably rewrite half the system because it's kind of a piece of shit. None of that matters. It's actually fantastic. You're also going to have to you're completely on your own with regards to like what sort of inspirational sources you can use. You're also going to have to figure that out. If you can, it's great. It's a bizarre hex crawl on this alien planet with sorcerers, human sacrifice, and laser beams, and all sorts of Lovecraftian horrors. It's really good. Can recommend. One of the best things that has come out in the OSR, to be honest. I don't really know anything else, any other sort of like setting that people have produced that comes close to having that level of just a pure like creative energy, drive, vision.
Wow, high praise.
Yeah.
Let's see. So Hank Barnett says personal favorite of the early levels is N4, Treasure Hunt. Any of y'all run it before?
I've read it, but I've not run it. It's got some interesting 0-level mechanics, and it's worth it for if you want to develop a character from nothing, from a normal person. As an adventure, it's very average, but it's the addition of going from level 0 to level 1 is a nice idea. So it's one of those oddities that is worth a look for something different. But I didn't think there was anything particularly compelling about the scenario.
I've kind of felt that you don't really. I've just been surprised by how many times a relatively plain module has exploded into fantastic play. So that being said, I do appreciate the weird shit. Clearly, considering one of my favorite introductory adventures is written by Venger Satanis.
Well, I think this weird sort of stuff. Yeah, there is something to be said for. it's almost as if you're appealing to like the person that's reading the adventure,
Mhm.
whereas an adventure probably should be made with the players in hand. And a lot of times, all this like beautiful language and like super weird stuff is it can be good, but I think its value is probably overrated. It's probably more the underlying structure, like a clever encounter design, the way everything works together. That's probably going to affect how the game is played a bit more, because ultimately adventures are interactive.
Right, right. Yeah, that's what's happening with my T1 stuff right now. Is they were all basically taken out by Knowles on a wandering monster check, and they're being interrogated by the bad guy of the moat house, and so like there's all kinds of
Oh dear.
shenanigans, going down with that. Now they have a rescue party of secondary PCs trying to go in there with people that they have made friends with, during their current expeditions, and how much of that's actually in there? Not much. I mean, he just pretty much just created a town and a place to go, and some NPCs that have things that they want to accomplish, and that's it. So,
But yeah, I was thinking about we had a little discussion earlier, I think with YeOldeGeek about B2 being fucking boring, and when you read it, you're kind of right, because it's really not, it's not spectacular or like
Those weren't my
spectacularly
exact
written.
I
It doesn't have a
I said there was nothing in there really that inspired me.
Right.
I thought T1 was more inspiring because there were names, there were motives.
I would
there was-
agree.
I can get if B2 has an immense flexibility, it's a good little base, but I just found I find the adventuring location a little bland.
Well, so I will never argue with anybody who says we talked about it, right? Like whatever, B2 needs a coat of paint, but at the same time, because that structure, like that format, works so well, that sort of explains why it's been played for all of these years, and people still get good stuff out of it, I think. And it has nothing to do with how it's written, because I kind of agree that with the exception of there's a block of text, almost box text, that kind of introduces the dungeon when you finally discover the Caves of Chaos. There's a little bit at the end where you actually enter the actual Temple of Evil Chaos, which is really good. But yeah, in between that, no, you have to do all the lifting. You have to make those goblins or whatever the fuck. You have to make them interesting. But all the structures, all the groundwork has been done for you. You only need to breathe life into it, basically.
all right. How do y'all feel about this? Wizard Jim says a good maxim for old school play is don't roll if you don't have to. The dice can betray you. Using the environment to achieve victory is the true min-max.
100%.
The more dice rolling you incorporate in the game, the less fun I always have. unless it's supposed to be like a party like game. But if I say, hey, I'm a fighter and the enemy's chasing after me, can I set up like a tripwire on the ground so it kind of trips them up? If you tell me I've got to roll for that, then I'm just like, come on, man, just let me. You know what I'm saying? Just let me put a little string right there and hammer it in real quick.
While failure can be fun, if you're rolling dice, there's a chance of failure. Surely the whole point of the game is to be successful. And if you can eliminate as much of that failure along the way as possible, you're more successful.
No, I don't agree with any of this. No, I wanted to say I think I agree with half of what No Fun Allowed says, right? I think you should. I noticed this with early 5e DMs that whatever, you approach a well, roll a perception check to see if you see something. And if you fail your check, you walk 10 feet closer and then you see it anyway. Great. Why did I roll that check? I guess to eat up my time. Right. So that's totally fair. I would actually say you should only roll if the outcome really matters. So
Yeah.
if you're running away from something and it's a life or death situation, and you are trying to do something under stress, like I'm trying to quickly tie this rope between two trees. Oh shit!
Well,
If the guy is doesn't have a background as a sailor or something, I would say, yeah, hell yeah, roll under dexterity. Okay, the most important rope you'll ever tie in your life. Let's see.
That wasn't the basis of my point. Though. The basis of my point. Yes, if you're doing anything under stress, if there's a chance of failure, if there's a chance of something going wrong with what they're doing, then yes, of course you roll. But it's up to the players to try and do their best to eliminate that doubt as much as possible along the way.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree with that.
And another thing, too, is specifically when it comes to skill systems where, I've got a plus 15 to my perception or whatever, right? The real question comes into play of, are you challenging the characters or are you challenging the players?
100% again.
Yeah, that's true. The whole point of like using the environment to achieve victory is the true min-max. That's true for old school games where you can't really meaningfully min-max by picking the right feats or whatever the hell, right? So then the environment, that's your weapon. That's like the only thing you can do to beat the DM, to even the odds against the encounters, against the dangers that you're faced with. And I think the problem or the alienating part of like these newer games for a lot of people is that disappears, and instead you can get as much leverage, if not more, by just building your character properly and reading rule books on a Sunday evening until you've memorized all of the feat combinations, and you're more effective that way. And I think that's where like a lot of people kind of like. It's less fun in a way. It's a lot less dynamic.
It's utterly tedious as far as I'm concerned. I do not want to play that way at all, ever.
Well, I think Particularists said it like we were talking about it one time, and it's like it's a solved problem in a sense. Once you figure it out, what the best combination is, that remains static. You don't ever have to pay attention ever again. You've already got your rage and your feats, and like this all combines, and the robot or the engine the machine does the same thing every time.
Yeah, if you're doing a character building thing, the problem with something being built around character building is that, especially in the day of the internet now, where people can communicate so easily, what happens is everyone just does all the brainstorming online, and the best builds are discovered immediately, and then there's no more decision making to be made. You just
the best build for level 5. You won't believe this damage.
Hell yeah!
Players at my
DMs
table
will cry. Yeah, exactly.
Players at my table are not allowed to refer to the characters as builds. That is a house rule, table rule.
25 AC at level 2. Here's how.
Wow.
The best multi-class options for you.
The whole idea that you're going to minimize risk via how you design your character isn't very interesting to me because of the solved problem aspect of it. For my own sake, when I am running the game, I do encourage my players that your goal is to minimize risk so that you might not even have to roll. Or if you do roll, the odds will be heavily stacked in your favor because you've got the right tools, you've got the right skills, you put the right person in place. You're going to roll less dice or possibly roll more dice because of advantage, depending if you use that mechanic or not. But ideally minimizing the risk. That said, I did think a comment that Dark Knight made in chat was pretty funny and actually very true in a way. He made a comment about people who want to roll or trying to share the sound that happens in their head with the rest of the table.
Is it tabletop ASMR? Holy fuck.
The sound of rattling in their head. They want to share that by having the dice make that noise. And I do think there is something there. Taking away all the players' dice rolls, people, especially depending on the group, especially people who come out of 3rd edition or 5th edition, I don't know. There's something about rolling dice that people do seem to enjoy. So I do feel like you need to provide opportunities for that, even if you do appreciate the risk minimization, roll minimization style. I don't know.
I think that if your character dies enough because you had to roll dice, then you get a Pavlovian Pavlovian, intuition that dice rolling is actually bad. And
For my own sake, I have never managed to instill that in my players. I do have one player who repeatedly comments every time he's asked to roll dice that, boy, we came up with this great plan, and in the end, there's a random chance that it's going to fail. He complains about that every time, but it doesn't stop him, and he's kind of joking about it too.
Well,
fundamentally, that's the game.
I've encountered that sentiment too, actually. A guy who's been my DM for a while, right? He actually says that, like, in his when he plays, what he hates most of all is that if he makes a plan and then it's still, despite a modifier, up to random chance, and his plan can still fail. But I think if you remove that element of chance entirely and it just becomes entirely deterministic, like, something of the game is absolutely lost. You should never have a 100% chance of succeeding. Like, unless it's like really trivial, right? You don't want to. I mean, we've probably all had this situation where
it will happen. We'll have that 100% situation, but in practice, it's there's no way they're all going to be like that.
Eight PCs versus, like, whatever, 2 orcs, and you've been rolling really high for the orcs, and they've been rolling shittily for like the last couple of rounds. It doesn't matter, right? At some point, you're like, okay, moving on. But even when you craft a really good plan, there should still be an element of chance. There should be a small chance that things do not go according to plan. It's part of the fun. You have to improvise.
Yeah, I think a part of it would just be to spread the failure out. Having these single rolls that just cause a lot of stuff to happen can take away the chance for the players to have that kind of push-pull reaction thing where part of the plan fails. Now what? How do you respond? What are you going to do from here? Things are not going your way.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, we got some love for Lost Minds of Phandelver. I guess maybe we could just briefly say what's great about it, because I don't think
Isn't
we
that
actually
a
did that.
5th edition module?
It is. It is the starter kit one.
I'll grab it.
Anybody want to take this?
So what makes it good is the fact that, of course, like most adventures, it starts off in a linear fashion, but it does open up to be a sandbox. And it's not, a sandbox in the form of, something like Keep on the Borderlands, I guess, where you've got this vast thing and this humongous dungeon. But it does have a whole bunch of nice little places of interest. It has an overarching set of villains. It has an antagonistic group which you can immediately deal with and have a full swagged out little place, and it's got fleshed out NPCs, and it just has the complete package of what you want in a adventure where you want exploration, combat, and roleplay. Although, admittedly, while it has all that going on, the first portion of it is incredibly terrible and purely as written. Most groups TPK in the very first session.
Yeah, if that first combat, if you run the goblins with even the slightest bit of intelligence, the players have absolutely no chance. They're just going to get wiped out. The goblins are perfectly capable of being utilizing the environment to be basically invisible while just raining arrows on the players.
But once you get over that little hump, then the adventure opens up to what it is, and you're Gucci after that.
Yep, I agree with your assessment. I also like that there's a freaking dragon just chilling around in the module that they can encounter, and it can be too much.
You're not forced to encounter it.
No, not really. You get a seed that kind of can take you off in that direction, and even then, there's some cultists there that might indicate that maybe you shouldn't go further. If you go up there, then I think Venom Fang was the name or whatever, and you deserve to die.
No, but I firmly believe that this is this should be an element of low-level play, that you put very obvious death traps in there to sort of dissuade the most foolhardy players, to sort of train them to recognize elementary danger.
In my sandbox, in my sandbox campaign, I gave them a fairly simple scenario to sort out. Why are fish? They were level 1 and 2. Why are fishermen disappearing from the local bay? There's an island over there. Go and investigate why the fishing boats are heading over there. And all they had to do was negotiate with a group of sirens. That there was a group of ghouls on the island that were killing the men that they were charming. That they were their pets, and they needed some pet men. That's all they had to do. Go and kill the ghouls, make the sirens happy, to give the fishermen back.
But they attacked. I assume they tried to kill the sirens or something.
No, they in order to make the environment more organic, there were sharks in the reefs, there were giant octopuses if they went swimming, and there was a huge ancient mist dragon chilling in its cave, wanting to be undiscovered on the far side of the island, in the bit of the island I thought they'd never bother going to.
I love just having that stuff sitting around.
So what do? They go and poke the mist dragon. And yeah, of course they do. Of course they do.
No, but
yeah,
this I feel having this in a game, the opportunity, it's not even that great, but it should be a basic condition. Just it's one of the things I liked about Particularist made. I think you made a module. What is it?
Vault of the Warlord.
Vault of the Warlord. That is correct. I like that too, where there's a very obvious threat, right? Or you're obviously being baited, you know, and then people, like some people are foolhardy and they still go for it, and there's a small chance usually that you'll come out of it with a reward, but at that point it is up to luck. You can actually fuck yourself like that. I think that's good. An adventure should have that. You should have like obvious, very clear and present danger. That like, yeah. I think it adds to it. The idea that you can, in fact, die.
Hell yeah. Let's see here. So this was when we were talking about Tomb of Annihilation. Hank Barnett says, I think what Aaron was saying is why many of the players don't tend to like it. My brother tried running Tomb of Annihilation for his group, and it was universally hated, and they still all talk shit about it. That being the old school sentiments that are in there throughout.
Is that is this an old school view of Tomb of Annihilation, or is Hank Barnett more like a Strixhaven apocalypse world kind of guy?
I get the sentiment that he's
gonna be old school.
Yeah, he's old school.
Well, regardless of how he is, he's suggesting that newer players don't like it because it's too old school. Is the idea?
Oh,
yeah,
I should check it out then. Like I've checked out all the other Tomb of Horror shit. So
yeah, like I said, it's a combo of Isle of Dread, Dwellers, Forbidden City, Tomb of Horrors, you know, Tarantumachan, stuff like that, and purely as written. Like going, you know, once again, no one ever runs anything purely as written, and you should never run anything purely as written. But running it purely as written, at level 1, your players can go up against the zombie T-Rex. You know, it's like that level of like.
Oh, but that rocks.
Kind of things can
happen. What do you mean you shouldn't run it like that? You should. Hell yeah.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't run it like that. I'm just saying you shouldn't run anything purely as written. But you know, it's that level of play which purely as written, I know a lot of people wouldn't appreciate, where basically you get dropped off into a jungle and it's super expensive, so you gotta get money and you gotta spend money to make money, and it's a constant like gold influx of you have to give away like half of your swag to these colonizing people, and then you got to go fight some zombies, and then someone's getting kidnapped by some yuan tea and stuff. You know,
this sounds really good, like by the way. As in, I feel like what you're describing is an environment that is constantly like pressuring you and depleting your resources. It sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, add in the curse that affects bringing players back from the dead.
Yeah, and that's honestly the biggest draw for me, is the fact that, you know, in all D&D, you know, it's always the trope of once you hit a certain level, no one can die, because once you die, you just come back to life, right? And the whole idea of Tomb of Annihilation is the fact that no one can be brought back from the dead, and everyone who was brought back from the dead is now currently dying. Mm-hmm. So that means essentially all of the high level adventurers would be dying now, and all of the emperors and kings and sorcerers and those people are all dying. So the world, even though obviously like people not coming back to life would only affect the 1%, that 1% would be so impactful of the world that them dying permanently would be a humongous deal.
Oh, this is kind of to explain why comparatively low-level characters are tackling the tomb.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
yeah, and that's honestly a perfect draw. And is like, hey, all the high-level adventurers, they're all rotting away, so we got to send in the chumps and hope for the best. And like, that's honestly a great hook. I love it.
Let's see. This is really just a fact, just facts people might want to know. Essentials Kit is more or less an extension of the same locale from Lost Mines of Phandelver, which means it's probably pretty decent. Let's see. I don't know anything about. Oh, go ahead.
Take off. See ya.
Oh, okay. It was good having you, man.
Talk to you later, man.
See you.
So Total Party Skills, he says that one of his favorite modules was Day of Al Akbar, and I don't know anything about it. I'm curious if y'all do.
I have not heard of that. Let's take a look. Is that is that for a certain setting, or
It's I9, I believe.
I9.
That would have been. I was 1E, right? It never made the switch to 2E. I think it probably showed up in whatever Zakara or something. Second edition.
As the name sounds, it is a desert setting, fairly high levels. I think I have read it. I've never run it. It's
character levels 8 to 10, pretty big.
Say around level 8. Yeah, fairly high. Oh, the I range of modules is intermediate, so it's 4 through 10 sort of generally. I've heard a lot of good things about it. It's just one I've never got around to running.
Second edition gets a really bad rep when it comes to adventures, because that's the period when railroading became very mainstream and popular. But by the end of second edition, when it had been taken over by WotC, Bruce Cordell made a lot of pretty awesome adventures. There's he made a sort of like trilogy centered around certain monsters. So you have the Illithid series and the Sahuagin series that are pretty great. He also did so-called Return of the Tomb of Horrors, which is sort of like Tomb of Horrors turned up to 11, which it has its flaws, but like when it's good, it's absolutely amazing. And I think he did the last adventure for 2E as well, Die Vecna Die, which is again also another adventure kind of feel where he completely cuts the brakes basically on the car and just goes completely nuts. Yeah, so that is good stuff.
I didn't particularly like Die Vecna Die.
It in sort of like, if you like Excess, if you like Michael Bay, Transformers or the Avengers style movies, it absolutely has a certain charm, I would say.
So Cal Venani says, for me, I like the A, G, B, D, and U series.
There's about 30 odd modules in that.
Very good good on you for omitting Q. I didn't like Q either.
Oh,
Q often gets mentioned. Q was like it wasn't quite there.
A was mixed, very good. 2 very good ones, 2 so-so ones. G fantastic, D fantastic, B a big mix, U series fantastic. Apart from the middle one, which was a good idea, but could fall flat if they had a clever party.
Would agree. Probably B is a mixed bag. Yeah, when it's good, it's very good. There's a few stinkers in there. Totally agree.
Alex says, God that crawls has tons of treasure. Question is, how long are you willing to stick around to loot the place? I love that about that adventure. That's one I haven't run. For those who don't know, it's a Lamentations of the Flame Princess adventure. It's also one that, like, in order for the module to actually function, there's a big if, and if the if doesn't happen, then
that's kind of like the idea is, right, you get some villagers kind of there's a weird church, you go there, everything seems all right, and they kind of trick you, or they have to sort of like figure out a way to get you into a pit. And once you're in that pit, in the catacombs of the church, they kind of trap you there, and you're chased by the I think the jellified ooze form of of Saint Augustine, like some sort of like a horrific, very slow, very strong monster, and you have to escape. And that's the entire adventure, and it kind of rocks. And you do very often, you have the opportunity to loot, but looting, it takes time and it makes noise. This is really, it's very good. It's a good conceit.
Is that a Lamentations module?
Oh yes, yeah.
Sounds
James
like
Raji as well. The God That Crawls. That one is pretty cool.
Yeah, they have like a spectrum of how Lamentations is it, and I want to say that one would be like maybe a 3 or a 4.
No, fuck no. That's like a 6 or a 7 on the Lamentation. Okay, sorry. Before we continue, what for you is a 10 and a 1 of like how Lamentations
a 10 for me is Death, Love, Doom.
Okay, that is the best. That is the best choice. I have also run that one. Yeah, that's correct.
A 1, it would have to be. I guess it would be. Say what?
A B1 would be the a 1
I was
the
talking
Lamentation
as far
scale,
as like as far as Lamentations style goes, though, it would be the grinding gear. Is that what it's called?
No, the grinding gear is absolutely Lamentations. It's punishing. It's mocking you while you're playing.
I think more so is in regards of would you be allowed to run this in public? Yes or no?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for.
Okay, like that, like the yikes factor. Okay, yes. But in a sense that's grueling and punishing, and it's like making fun of the players like, while they're suffering.
More so about the content found.
Yeah.
Right.
How many like dead children are there? How many?
But it's a huge. Okay. So D&D has exploration, combat, social. Okay. Lamentations has absolutely the gore factor. The can't run it in public factor. But it's not the only pillar of Lamentations gameplay. There's other ones in there too.
Yeah, I feel like that's the signature, perhaps. It's like that's the thing that you don't really get from a whole lot of other things, at least that I've looked into.
Well, I mean, you can pick up any adventure module ever, but only Lamentations are going to be the ones that have a content warning on it, right?
Well, yeah, but at the same time, like their best stuff isn't. I feel almost like that. That sort of shock factor is almost opposed to like quality, because I think their best work in Lamentations isn't their most shocking work. That shock factor is very often used to like sort of paper over or punch up like a weak sort of scenario. Like their best stuff. What is it? Stargazer, Death Frost Doom, Better Than Any Man. All this stuff, it has those elements in it, but it kind of stands on its own.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Although Better Than Any Man has it's quite a bit.
Oh Jesus, how you get rumors in that adventure? Yeah, but that's why this is like James Raji's magnum opus. Only he could conceive of there's an inn and you can get rumors, but it's not enough that you buy some drinks. Oh no, this is some sort of like brothel, and you have to. Whatever, you have to subject yourself, to like various indignities, and only in that way you can
well,
get
the important
the
thing is you have to roll for it, yes or no.
Yes, you do have to roll for it.
So there you go. All right, I gotta head out. Peace.
It was good having you, man.
I think
Let's
there's a couple
see.
of members of my group that has just fallen apart who would have really enjoyed that. I think if there's any of them watching at the moment, Richie would love that stuff.
No, I think it's almost the as the shock factor goes up, the quality almost inevitably plummets. There's a few. Yeah, no, I can't find I can't find an example of like one where it's both extremely shocking and extremely good. It's there's a sort of golden area in the middle, I feel, where sometimes it can be used to add a little like bite to the scenario to elevate it. But
I can't disagree with you too much about so far.
it's a good point.
Let's see. Well, this was just an observation from Alex saying Fritz Lieber sorcerers have a bunch of odd junk in their lairs, like a shaved bear cub.
Fritz Lieber sorcerers are that's like a good adjunct to Jack Vance or whatever, Robert E. Howard. Yeah, it's just the whole point is to make sorcerers are like really like evil, weird assholes that deal with matters that are completely beyond normal human experience. That's the point. And yeah, when you explore a wizard's dungeon or a wizard's tower, you kind of want to see some of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially if you've gotten into that kind of fiction. You know, now that I've been ruined on Jack Vance, it's really hard for me to like just see a wizard who's just a swell guy and wants to do all the right things, or to just think of like a magic academy, like Hogwarts or anything like that. I'm like, no, you're doing it wrong. You need to be constantly trying to scheme over each other and kill each other and do terrible things. You just that's the stuff I love.
Yeah, if you ever want an antidote that isn't lame, right? That isn't Harry Potter. There's another one on the appendix N. It's not really often talked about. It's by, I think it's L.E. Modesitt Jr. Okay, the name escapes me. It was very embarrassing. It doesn't matter. It's about basically it's a psychologist, and he learns a system of magic that allows him to travel into imaginary worlds. So he goes to the world of like the Eddas, so like the Viking world, right? And he meets Loki and Thor, and they do go to some sort of giant's place. That's probably been the inspiration for a G1, among other things. And spell components are in there too, because every imaginary world that they venture into has its own rules regarding magic. This is it's not brought up that often. Fritz Lieber, Jack Vance, Michael Moorcock, Robert E. Howard. That's kind of like the most recognizable Appendix N stuff. But this guy, I think it's L.E. Modest. No, it's not L.E. Modest. I can't come up with the name right now. But he's pretty good.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I'm working my way through the Appendix N list. Let's see. We got some more comments. These are more recent. Dave Mills says Greyhawk modules after Gary was outed had no soul. Cannot confirm. That was 3rd edition era, wasn't it? Well,
No,
I mean,
No. 2nd edition.
Well, I just meant as far as like whenever they were trying to bring Greyhawk back.
Oh.
2nd and 3rd. It was
Second and
late 1st edition, all of 2nd and 3rd.
Yeah, the it's true. Yeah, 2nd. They try to make it more dark. Sorry, I looked it up by the way. It's Elsprog the Camp, the Complete Enchanter is what I was talking about.
Okay.
But yes, 2nd edition. I think they tried to make it too serious. Gary Gygax's version of Greyhawk was always kind of idiosyncratic. You could encounter whatever. You could have Expedition to the Barrier Peaks in there, or Castle Greyhawk, where you could travel into a mystical portal and visit whatever King Kong's island, right? The Isle of the Ape. all this stuff was in there.
Barry's done with the Cthulhu elements to it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Temple of Tharizdun is absolutely amazing. But the point is, it was very different from the more kind of dark fantasy, grittier feel of second edition, which is very much unlike like Gary Gygax's 1E Greyhawk.
Whenever I want to go over this comment first, but there's another one that caught my eye. Dave Mills says, had a rules by the book 5e DM run Tomb of Annihilation for a group of 6, and we all died 4 to 6 times. That sounds good.
Sounds like it was working as intended.
Yeah.
That's all.
Let's see. Okay, so that one that caught my eye. Total Party Skill says, I quite enjoyed the shower scene in the Strixhaven module for 5e. It really blows anything that Gygax wrote out of the water. Amazing writing. I legitimately am not sure if he's being serious that there actually is a shower scene or not. I can't be certain if whether that's just him making a joke. That's what is that? Poe's Law, isn't it?
Oh, jeez.
Wasn't Strixhaven the fantasy coffee shop type one?
Yeah, fancy Hogwarts with less drama. I'll be right back, by the way.
All right. Let's see. JP Morris asks, are you guys okay with the way it fakes interaction with the water trap the goblins have? Which one was that about?
I think he was referring to Vandelver.
Oh, I don't remember that. Water trap the goblins.
That comment coming in during our discussion of Vandelver.
Huh. It's been a while since I ran that, so it could be in relation to that. In general, though, faking interaction, being written into a module, I'm usually not keen on. I'd prefer it to be a genuine thing, but it's hard to really judge without the context.
Yeah.
Well, this is an interesting take. Lynchpin says 2 orcs, 8 players is the players' fault. The players should have dog-pilled the orcs, and the DM lets them win instead of opening the grappling rules.
That's what I said, right? At some point, you can kind of see in certain combats, you can kind of see that like the chance of the players losing becomes utterly negligible, and at that point, I think it's depending on how if you're a quick resolution guy, you can go through it. But like sometimes it's like it's been 12 rounds. No, like back that shit in. Okay?
It's time
never
for
going to amount to anything.
It's time for it's time to open up negotiation for the orcs' lives at that point.
Well, sometimes they should have already made their morale roll at that point, and if they haven't, sometimes you roll really well, and then I say no, the orcs start chanting their death chants. Yeah, they're ready. They're going to Orc Valhalla. No, you got to cut them down. But I totally agree.
These comments are all over the place. Some people like rolling dice. It'd be awkward if you went to Vegas and the dealer rolled your dice for you at the craps table. I get that.
We're not playing a game of random like craps.
Yeah. I'm one of those weirdos that would enjoy playing, the way that it was rumored to have been played back in the day when you didn't even have your own character sheet and all you did was say what your character did. And DM did everything. I'd be okay with that as a player, but
I like some dice rolling because it does give you that sense of tension.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when my players come up with a plan that I just say, yeah, just that was great, do it.
Well, that's what the game's about.
Um, y- yeah, I'm not a huge fan of automatic success, but I will say that like if your players spend 20 minutes on like a plan and it's in your estimation it would totally work. Like totally scamming them on the dice roll afterwards. That is that is a big faux
Here's
pas. So I
probably
kind of agree.
here's my probably my favorite plan that my players came up with. I might have mentioned it in some chats before, but I had Lareth from T1 as an ongoing adversary because he'd beaten the party and they'd run away, but I ruled that he would have left his lair because his lair's been discovered. And I left a clue in his lair to lead the party then to UK 2 and 3, the Sentinel and the Gauntlet. And I thought, what's the best sort of time for them to encounter Lareth properly and have a proper showdown with him? And it was when they were around level 4. So they on the road to UK 3. So I had them see his encampment ahead. They knew that he was hunting for the Gauntlet in that adventure. That's how I tied him into it. And Lareth, of course, is a decent level cleric. He'd got with him the bugbears from T1 and most of his sergeants, lieutenants, guards, and whatever. So it was a group of about 30 odd of them. And there's my party of about 7 level 3 and 4 characters, severely outgunned still. So what they did is they hid and observed using their familiars. There were 2 mages in the party who both rolled a Falcon familiar when they cast Find Familiar, which was a bit of luck for them. And they observed and waited until the camp bedded down for the night. They'd completed the module UK 4, and one of the gifts they'd got in that adventure was a folding boat. So they made it into its smallest size. They crept as close to the camp as they could. They got the 2 falcons to hover above Lareth's tent holding the folding boat, and one of the mages then cast a ventriloquism to send the command word to the folding boat to drop it on Lareth's tent at its maximum size.
Yeah, that's great.
Wonderful plan. And the dice rolls I used then, I made a saving throw for Lareth. I rolled a 1.
Oh yeah.
So okay, he's pinned under the boat. One of the party, then obviously all hell breaks loose. They had a cavalier in the party who charged into the as all the guards were coming out naked, semi-naked, because they were sleeping, they'd been drinking, they hadn't got their weapons with them, coming out of the tents. Party druid casts Entangle, which managed to get all the bugbears, which then most of them failed their saving throw. So there's dice involved there. There's dice. The cavalier goes charging into the encampment on his horse with his lance at this disarray of guards. Their leader is pinned. Meanwhile, the party thief downs a potion of diminution, creeps into Lareth's tent, and force feeds him poison. Finish him off.
No, it's again.
The dice rolls here,
that's the good stuff. That's the
dice
D&D
rolls
good
here
stuff.
are all dice rolls to see exactly how much impact it has on the enemy, because the plan was so damn good that I'm not going to make dice rolls to say this plan fails. I'm going to say the dice rolls say will decide how much impact it has on the enemy. And the dice rolls went in the player's favor, and it was absolute carnage. They took out that entire encampment and probably took single figures damage in total.
That's amazing.
Beautiful, and it's so memorable. You remember these plans that are so well, and you want them to work because they are so. It's the essence of the game to me.
I would agree that a very huge part of like what makes role-playing games good is like players coming up with silly plans. I do remember when I was playing when I was running Dark Heresy, my players. So 2 of them, they needed some information, so they were on this quasi-medieval planet. They were breaking into an office to get some documentation, some information. They actually got caught, so they got arrested and everything. And was announced that in like say 5 days they would be burned at the stake for their trespasses and heresy. So you had half the party They were down on their luck. All of the authorities, there was no way that could prevail against them, by themselves. But this city, it actually had a lot of disenfranchised homeless people that were really down on their luck, and the local aristocracy cared not a whit for them. So they bribed them to, during the public execution, to throw Molotov cocktails into the crowd, causing a massive panic. And then, when the soldiers were opening fire on the crowd, which was running willy-nilly, just to maintain their cordon, then they stormed the pyres, and they freed their compatriots. And I think then one of them unleashed some sort of psychic power that caused them mass possession. It was a huge shit show. But yeah, that plan is amazing. Whenever they come up with some sort of unorthodox solution that completely blows you out of the water, yeah, of course. Should still obey the rules of the game, but it is great.
Yep. Dark Knight of Hibernia has a startling confession. He says he got 32 AC by 4th level. His DM gave him a +3 shield and a +3 plate mail for 100 gold pieces.
No, I don't. That didn't happen.
All I have to say is that we're going to have to develop a camp, I think, for these kinds of DMs to teach them the proper ways. They have to be retrained.
Well, can I be on fingernail removal duty?
So what?
Can I be in that camp? Can I be on fingernail removal duty?
Oh boy, no. I would say if you're
that kind of camp,
the more Monty Hall you are, the harder you have to play. I think if you're very restrained and laid back, you can kind of afford to take it easy. But the more magic items you hand out, the more you have to kind of remove or kill players, or there is a sort of equilibrium that has to be maintained.
The more rust monsters you need to use.
For example, that's often forgotten, right? Rust monsters, save versus crushing blow, disenchanters. The whole idea is that basically in these older games, the idea is that you're supposed to use your limited charge items, and you're supposed to occasionally lose magic items as well. That's why they're so common. Then it makes sense. If that never happens, then you just keep accumulating them to the point where they're just going to give them away or whatever, sell them, or they'll just have too much.
That precise rule, when I ran Lost Caverns of Sodgecamp for that same group, by the time they got to level 7 or 8, the Cavalier in that party was an absolute juggernaut. But they got to the final encounter. They dealt with the vampiress at the end. But there were 2 creatures that then pop out when they start interfering with the treasure. And these creatures explode. And the explosion of those creatures destroyed 50% of the treasure, as well as the Cavalier's armor, the Cavalier's shield, and he was left stood there with I've got no armor left. You're meant to use those rules.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. I took great joy from in B10. So Night's Dark Terror, there is a sort of exploding gem trap, and the PCs they put it in their bag of holding, which is full of gemstones. I was like, all right, item saving throw time, and it's that gemstone took out a lot of their gold.
Ouch. Thomas Bobo says theory crafting is just boring, and I'm going to. I mean,
Mostly
it is
agree,
for me. It is for me. I'm under a new hypothesis that theory crafting is for players that don't DM. It's the fun that they can have away from the table whenever they're not, creating adventures and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be theory crafting or my OC syndrome. Whenever they're going to come up with
and more inexperienced players that do it.
I did it when I first started. I did a lot of theory crafting. I did that for up until the point when I started DMing, and I was like, "Wow, why was I doing that?" Well, I mean,
wait,
I also
theory crafting is In what context do we mean?
That's a good point. Yeah. So in the conversation that they were having in the comments, it was pretty much about builds. The white room theory crafting of, if I do this, get this, and this, then if I enter this situation, then I can use that combination of features in order to do X or Y kind of thing. Which, I mean, I'm not going to say that it didn't exist in the old stuff, because what it would look like instead is, well, if I'm lucky enough to be able to learn this spell, then this spell is really useful in these conditions, kind of thing. But it's not really going to be to the same extent, I would say. It's especially considering you end up getting this very legalistic interpretation, and trying to combine all kinds of different things together to try and make the best use out of it.
Well, in that sense, I think it's a slippery slope, right? Because if you're running your game properly, probably players should be trying to look at, like, okay, how can I squeeze a little bit more juice out of this, or like, what is a better combination of spells? So that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, like, theory crafting in the sense of optimum builds is probably kind of shitty. Or even I notice it a lot in the blogosphere, that people sort of like over intellectualize what makes good D&D or makes good adventures. And it's mostly just a practice with a few guidelines that does the trick. But it is fun to write some article about like how things should be, and then everybody says it's really brilliant, and it completely does not get adopted. It's just like it lies there totally inert.
I think that's a low IQ take, Prince of Nothing.
It's a high IQ take.
It's
the highest IQ take.
Theory crafting and just making something that is effective.
You should be trying to do that. You should be trying to
make something that is effective, but if you try and push it to that nth degree, that's when it becomes tedious.
What I was going to say is that the theory crafting thing, the reason that I think it kind of gets to these incredible degrees is because a lot of it happens before you even have a game. This is. I don't even have a table, because I mean, especially if you're playing like first edition, and you're trying to think about what is the best way that I can use these spells. You don't even know if you're going to get those spells if you're a magic user. But if depending on the edition, you might actually just get to choose what spells you get as you level up. I mean, that's how 5th edition works.
That's why I don't allow that in 5th edition. They have to. I use the 1st edition style spell.
It is very beautiful, especially once you have a wizard or magic user who is just has this giant spell book of things that they've accumulated, and half of them are things that they're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to use this, but maybe someday I'll have to.
It makes them be creative. It makes them more creative, and it varies the choices.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they'll all just go for fireball and magic missile.
Right.
And
and then people just want to invent different colored or elemental fireballs just so that they can feel a little bit different.
But it doesn't make it any more interesting.
Right.
There's nothing imaginative about running into an encounter and casting fireball.
Although, again, part of the game is like you have like if the game is just you carrying like whatever 3 fireball spells, then it's boring. But you having 1 fireball spell prepared, and then as a wizard deciding when to use or not to use it, that is part of the game. That is interesting, right? It's like your nuke, your get out of jail free card. Like when to use that or not is a huge part of whether or not your delve will be successful.
Let's see. This is an interesting point. Total Party Skill says, in a sense, rolling the dice is the only tactile contact the player has with the game environment. I don't know that I agree with the language the game okay, yeah, I guess
it's accurate, but does it matter? That's the question.
I think it's going to matter to some people. I have met some of the rumored dice goblins, as they like to call themselves, and they do like to roll their dice, and they get upset if they don't get to, even if a lot of people feel that a session where there's not a whole lot of dice rolled is often a great one.
Well, probably you probably engage with the game in more ways if you involve like a tactile sense. That sounds really stupid, but that's how your brain works. Probably if you use an extra dimension of like perception, like touch, or performing some action, it probably gets stored in your brain like much better. Probably get more dopamine.
Keeping a map helps keep you engaged with the environment, though.
That also, yeah, like the more senses you involve, right? You should have smell. You should have taste.
I'm gonna rub shit on the wall so everybody knows it's
That's
just
true.
like this
Yeah.
dungeon
Well,
smells.
you
just
already
like
did
the brain.
that. Like there's already shit on your walls, Aaron. So
You weren't supposed to tell them.
Okay, well, oops. Okay.
It's territory.
Let's see. I think it's about time to start wrapping it up, but let's see if we have any more.
There's a wait. While you're looking, Midnight Green asks, like, make a follow-up to the Palace of Unquiet Repose. I have a concept. I'm running my home group through it now. So, like, if they survive that, I'll run them through the next one. I'll run them through the sequel. I already know what I'm going to do.
So this is a take here. Thomas Bobo says, Secret of Bone Hill is greater than Keep on the Boring Lands.
Geez, it's been a while since I read Secret of Bone Hill. It's probably really good. Keep on the Borderlands. The only thing, like, it needs a bigger wilderness environment, which in my campaign on your server, I've added Geoffrey McKinney's Forsaken Wilderlands, right? Which has like 10 Wilderlands maps that are bolted onto the Wilderlands of Keep, which only has 4 encounters. But I don't remember Secret of Bone Hill well enough
Bone
to
Hill is an
tell you
excellent.
whether or not you're an idiot. Probably not.
Bone Hill is an excellent sandbox, level 2 to 4. It's probably too hard for level 2, but there's a lot of flexibility in there for the DM. There's a good little town. I never quite gelled with it because, as far as it was Len Lakofka's writing style, he was creative. He created a nice little setting, a nice little area, but his writing style and his choice of names. I had to just cross all his names out and write some new ones in because I didn't like them. And it's daft, but that has an effect.
I'm just glad when I'm not the one who has to think of the names. Obaki says, what are your guys' thoughts on Critical Role getting official modules? To me, I don't mind too much, but wish they were also releasing more variety of modules alongside it. I will say that arguably they are releasing, okay, so maybe not more variety of modules alongside it, but at least they are releasing other ones. And I don't hate it, I don't read the Critical Role stuff, but from what I have friends who do, and they have remarked on it pretty highly as far as they seem to think that Matt Mercer does some really cool stuff with and there have been a few things that have been mentioned from like the Tal'Dorei, the first book that came out, like the way that they handle revives and stuff like that, which it's more interesting. It has a little bit more of that Conan feel, even though it's not quite as severe. It's still kind of like a little bit more in that direction where it's more of a ritual that can fail, and you need people to do things, and it's there's probably some good ideas in there. So
there's no doubt that Matt Mercer is a very competent DM and a very competent storyteller, and obviously he's got his acting background in terms of voice acting. But for me, Critical Role is just too slick. It's an entertainment product. It's not a real game.
I would say if he wants to make modules, by all means, let him. But this sort of stuff, right? If a celebrity brings out his material, I feel like you have so much, what is it? YeOldeGeek says there's so many other assets. Probably, if you're going to turn your home campaign adventures into a published work, you have so many assets that are hard to translate, and probably a lot of other things you won't even pay attention to them because you don't really need them. The end result that you're going for is like an enjoyable session. So this sort of stuff, it's not going to make much of a difference.
So another one from Obaki, whichever. And this was he says, I saw your video on 5e Ravenloft. What system do you feel is best for horror? Personally, I remember 3.5 having a lot of gnarly monsters that were scary in terms of mechanics. Then followed up by saying, I'd love to try a horror module, but I don't know what system is best. So I'm fortunately, we do have other people that can probably answer that question better. I've never run or played a horror system, I would say. The closest thing that I have played in is actual fucking monsters, which you're the monsters there. So it's not quite that. I have written and run horror modules, and that was for 5th edition. I've also played in a DCC horror module, and it's perfectly doable. But I would assume that really you're going to want to have something that makes the players feel danger, as much as possible, and that anything that makes them feel like they're in control is probably not going to be what you're looking for. And there are going to be things that are going to try and emulate horror stories where the players have control, stuff like Monster of the Week. But as far as, I don't know, I'll let the people that have experience with that go, especially YeOldeGeek.
my answer to that is there is no D&D version of D&D that is good for horror. The whole point of D&D is generally to take a low-level character through their career, becoming a hero, becoming powerful, becoming a bigwig in the world, whatever. Horror is the opposite to that. Horror is Call of Cthulhu does this so much better. You don't get any more hit points. You get better at your skills. You don't get any more hit points. But as time goes on, your sanity just ebbs away and you lose control. And it's that losing control, it's that hopelessness that makes the horror elements work. They don't work so well in D&D. I'm not saying, I did a review of Ravenloft the other day, and it's a fine adventure. It's got a good atmosphere to it. It's not horror.
It's like it's Halloween, spooky, scary horror. It's got a good tension, probably, because you got to run away a lot, right? You are you're on a ticking clock. It's pressuring you, but I would agree, it's not a. Well, I would say definitely don't use any World of Darkness system bullshit. Call of Cthulhu is probably the way you want to go.
Definitely.
Horror, I feel you can do it with almost any system, but like some systems are just going to be in the way, and any sort of complicated character building system is going to be it's going to be between you and the horror that you're trying to emulate. As YeOldeGeek says, you probably want characters to feel sort of like vulnerable in a way, and like a model where players get gradually more competent and strong, and they become increasingly formidable. That's the opposite of what you want in a horror setting.
All right. I feel like we've covered just about all the comments that I wanted to get to. Just double checking real quick. Is there anything else that y'all wanted to discuss, or maybe is there anything that you're doing that you want to shill?
I just want to say I have seen quite a few comments aimed at in my direction on the chat. I can't reply to them because I'm not logged into any form of chat. So
Yeah.
so they've been saying things to me, and I've seen them, I've noticed them, but I can't reply to them yet.
All right.
Yeah, I'll chill a little bit. Yeah, I'll probably start a new project soon, but no, Artpunk is currently free. So if you like old school Dungeons and Dragons, and you feel kind of alienated by a lot of the adventures that are currently coming out, which are just full of like wacky ideas and like homebrew stuff for weird systems that you like don't really recognize, and you just want to chill out, maybe enjoy an adventure that uses more stuff that's like in the DMG or in the actual monster manual, check out my collection on DriveThruRPG. It's called No Art Punk Volume 1. It's a compilation of a contest, collects the 8 best entries. These are all adventures that are made using original old school rule sets. So like a BX, you'll have AD&D, you'll maybe have some Adventure Conqueror King stuff slipping in between. Regardless, almost all of the monsters are book monsters, and the contestants were allowed to come up with a single monster, single spell, and single unique magic item to like sort of like supplement their work. So check it out. Yeah, it's free.
Heck yeah. And I'm gonna try to put, if I remember, I'm gonna try to put YeOldeGeek's channel link in the description, as well as Prince of Nothing's blog.
Hell yeah.
And everybody else who is on here. No fun allowed. And yeah. So thanks everybody for coming by and for discussing all this stuff. We'll be doing another one of these, I'm sure, maybe sometime. Maybe not all the same people, because people have lives and the stars don't always align, but everybody here is definitely invited back again because they're awesome. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, go ahead. Somebody say something.
I just said thank you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. My pleasure. All right. So we have here's some love for you. It's the old guys. We've been corrected. You missed it earlier.
It's an old way of writing it.
All right. Take it easy, everybody.
Cheers.
Later.